Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Planning Commission, December 13th, 2022, to order. If you would stand and join us in the flag salute, which will be led by Commissioner Spear.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call.
Chair Barbet,
Present.
Commissioner Barber,
Present.
Commissioner Doan is absent, Commissioner Maccaro,
Present.
Vice Chair Paul,
Yes, present.
Commissioner Spear,
Present.
and Commissioner Weiler is absent.
Thank you. All right, review of the minutes. Are there any comments, discussion of the minutes? Hearing none.
Move approval. Second.
Second. Okay, thank you. Roll call.
Chair Barbet,
Yes, approved.
Commissioner Barber,
Yes.
Commissioner Maccaro,
Approve.
Vice Chair Paul,
Yes, approve.
Commissioner Spear.
Yes, approve.
The vote is 5-0 to approve.
Written communications?
Good evening, Chair Barbet. Got him here. I'm Adam Feinstone, City Planner. We do have a few pieces of written communication here tonight. Three of them, I believe, are related to agenda item G1. One of those is a memo from planning staff to the commission. One of them is what is titled density bonus calculation on a table with a few other sheets behind it. And the third one on this item is a letter from Rattan and Tucker. All three of those, as I said, are related to item G1. And we have one piece of correspondence as well. That is a letter from San Diego North Economic Development Council related to item G2.
All right, thank you. All right, we have a number of public hearings this evening. The first one up is PL 21-0269, PL 21-0277, and PL 22-0584, tentative subdivision map, grading exemption, and annexation.
If you
Are there any sorry?
give me just a moment.
Sure, Adam. Before we begin, though, are there any disclosures regarding this project from commissioners? None. Okay, hearing none. Mr. Feinstone will provide the staff presentation.
All right, good evening, Chair Barbet, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Adam Feinstone. I'm your city planner. With me today, I've got Greg Mattson. He is a contract planner that's been working with city staff in order to process this and other projects. So he's been a very integral part of this project.
Excuse me. We don't have a screen? We have no display?
At the bottom right.
There we go. Does everyone have one now? Yeah? Sorry. Okay, I think we're good to go.
All right, great. Thank you. So the item before you tonight is this first item before you tonight is the Conway Residential Subdivision. The project includes a request for a tentative subdivision map and grading exemption for a residential subdivision. It also involves a request to annex a portion of the project site into the city of Escondido. And additionally, the project would make use of the density bonus provisions contained in state law and the Escondido zoning code. The property is located on the west side of Conway Drive, on the north and south sides of Stanley Avenue and north of Laner Avenue. The site has zoning designations of RE20 north of Stanley Avenue and R110 south of Stanley Avenue. with corresponding general plan land use designations of Estate 2 and suburban. Property is currently occupied by 15 dwelling units, and as you see here, it's in a semi-rural setting. It's surrounded by a mix of suburban and underutilized semi-rural development, and seen here. In Rincon Middle School, you'll see just southwest of the project site, right down there. And over here on the lower left-hand corner, that's Escondido High School, so it's just outside almost the image on the screen there. The project site is composed of 7 parcels totaling just over 14 acres in size. The project would subdivide the property into 47 residential lots consisting of 44 new single-family lots, 2 existing residences which would be placed on their own lots, and 1 multifamily lot which would accommodate 5 duplexes. 2 lettered lots would also be created for open space detention basins, which would be maintained by the homeowners association. The tentative map is shown here and has also been included with the staff report. Northern part of the project site is to include 23 single-family residential lots that are accessed from a new public street here off of north side of Stanley. Second public street that terminates in a cul-de-sac here as well. These are streets, I believe, H and G. There would also be the 2 existing single-family homes. As you see down in the lower right corner here, both would be placed on their own lots, so a property line through here, and they would be provided access directly from Stanley. The other lot on the site is a multifamily lot over in the upper left-hand corner of the site, and it would take access directly from Conway Drive. It'd be for 5 duplexes on the site, 10 units total. The southern portion of the project site would include 21 new single-family lots that would take access from public street here, a new public street off of Laner Drive or Laner Avenue. Grading exemptions, or grading consists of a series of cut and fill slopes to accommodate the proposed project. Pursuant to Article 55 of the Escondido Zoning Code, approval is required by the decision-making body for fill slopes greater than 10 feet in height, which are within 50 feet of a property line, and cut slopes greater than 2 to 1, which have been determined by the director to have potential impact on adjacent properties. There are 2 fill slopes on the project site that would trigger the need for the grading exemption. The first is adjacent to the northern property line near Conway and is necessary to provide access to the stormwater basin, this being the basin. This orange area is the slope and retaining wall combination that necessitates the grading exemption. Right next to that is a driveway that leads down to that basin. The second grading exemption is here on the northwest side of the lot 10. It'd be adjacent to the rear yard of a home over here off of Weiss Way. And then there's also 1 cut slope that meets the requirements or meets the definition of a slope that requires a grading exemption. That's here on the southwest corner of lot 24. It's a cut slope greater than 2 to 1 slope, and I think it's about 1.5 to 1 is what's been shown on the map there. The zoning code identifies 5 items to take into consideration when reviewing requests for grading exemptions. However, because the project has identified the proposed grading exemptions as development standards that must be waived in order to accommodate the density bonus project, the only consideration that must be addressed as it relates to the stability of the slope. Geotechnical reports have been provided that adequately address this issue, and a more detailed project drawings will be provided as part of the final engineering for the project. Additional information on the mentioned density bonus waiver or waivers will be presented shortly. One of the 7 lots that currently exist is within the county of San Diego. It's a slightly over 2 acre lot with 2 existing homes on it and would be annexed into the city as part of the project. The 2 homes would be placed on their own lots and both would be connected to the sewer system. Should the city council approve the project, annexation would be subject to approval by LAFCO. The location of the parcel to be annexed is on the north side of Stanley Avenue here, and it's on the western side of the project site there. So it's a portion of the northern half of the subdivision. As noted before, the project includes a request for a density bonus. Pursuant to both state law and Article 67 of the Escondido zoning code, density bonus project is permitted to exceed the otherwise maximum allowable density on a project site in exchange for providing deed-restricted affordable housing units. The greater the percentage of affordable units provided, the greater the increase in allowable density. The applicant has provided a density bonus calculation that identified the number of units that could be derived from each existing lot and then added them together to get a total yield. The calculation identified the ability to construct 40 base units, of which 25% would be affordable. This would allow them up to 18 additional dwelling units, though only 16 are being requested. Typically, the city has looked at total lot size in order to determine the number of base units allowed and has computed density bonus from that number. In the case of this project, this would yield 35 base units with a density bonus of 18 additional units for a total of 53. It's important to note that all fractional units are rounded up, which explains the total number of base units being discrepant between the two ways of running calculations. While the calculation provided by the applicant was done differently than has been done in the past, density bonus law and zoning code and the Escondido zoning code required the provisions of density bonus law to be interpreted liberally in favor of producing the greatest number of dwelling units. In addition to the increased density discussed previously, a density bonus project is also entitled to concessions from zoning code requirements. Similar to density, this is on a sliding scale with more concessions permitted when a greater number of units are deed restricted for affordable housing. In this case, the project would be entitled to up to 3 concessions, but has only requested 1, which is the allowance for multifamily dwellings on the project site to be used for their affordable housing units. Excuse me. The project is also entitled to waivers from development standards if they are necessary to accommodate the density bonus project. The only caveat is that such waivers cannot create adverse impacts to health, safety, or the physical environment. Project has requested waivers related to setbacks, reduction of setbacks, lot size reduction, increased lot coverage allowance and increased floor area ratio allowance, reduction in lot width, modified street standards and fire department turnarounds, grading exemptions, and modifications to storm drain standards. A mitigated negative declaration was prepared for the project, and it identified potentially significant impacts in the areas of air quality, biology, cultural resources, geology, hazards and hazardous materials, noise, transportation and traffic, and tribal cultural resources. Mitigation measures have been applied to the project that would reduce all impacts to a less than significant level. Public input was provided on the MND, and in additional correspondence received ahead of this meeting, which was forwarded to you earlier today for consideration and left on the dais. In addition, there was a separate piece of correspondence that was provided this evening, that density bonus table, and I have not yet reviewed that myself, so but that is related to this project. General areas of concern include, but are not limited to, density and land use, traffic, parking, biology, which includes habitat and protected species, grading and site design, and density bonus waivers. Prior to staff making recommendation on the project, I would like to bring to the attention of the Planning Commission the modification of a condition of approval. It is Housing and Neighborhood Services Condition Number 1 and has been revised to incorporate language that references state law pertaining to deed restriction of requirements for the units if those units are to be for sale. A memo with the revised text has been provided to the Commission via email, and it is also on the dais. Based on the information presented here and the analysis in the Planning Commission staff report, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the project to the City Council, including adoption of the final mitigated negative declaration. This concludes staff's presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the Commission may have.
Madam Chair, I have questions.
Right. So the questions from the commission right now will be simply to clarify and better understand the staff presentation before we go to public comments.
Very good. Okay. I've gone through all of the, not only the staff report, but all of the communications we've received from concerned residents. Could staff please discuss the need for the alternative fire truck emergency turnaround and why that might or might not be feasible?
Let me pull that up here. So the area the fire department turnaround typically, based on certain lengths of roadways or of driveways, require, and actually I should say a certain number of units served, requires a cul-de-sac similar to what you see on the other lots or on these other areas here. In this instance, the applicant has requested, in order to be able to accommodate the units on their project, they've requested the use of a hammerhead here. So it's kind of a ability to make a 3-point turn. The fire department has reviewed this and are comfortable and confident that they will be able to serve the project adequately. It would require a 3-point turn, like I said, rather than utilization of a cul-de-sac. But the depth and the length of that driveway is not sufficiently long that they've got concern over the ability to utilize it as needed.
Thank you. There is concern that an environmental impact report might be needed because there was a interpretation that there's significant impacts to the aesthetics. I'm curious as to how does CEQA define significant impacts to aesthetics that might trigger an EIR?
Off the top of my head, I can't tell you the specific detail on that. I don't have that level of knowledge on CEQA just off the cuff. But there are there are requirements in the code that deal with scenic vistas, and I believe, I'm trying to recall, I do apologize.
If you can just clarify how staff reached their conclusion that it was appropriate to do a negative declaration as opposed to an EIR.
Sure. So the initial study that's done as part of the environmental review, so as part of any type of a environmental document, that's done in order to determine whether a mitigated negative declaration, or environmental impact report are necessary. Through the initial study, it was determined that if there were impacts to different topic areas, which I had mentioned, let me get to it here. So there were impacts identified in the areas you see here. However, and those impacts were potentially significant. However, mitigation measures have been applied that would reduce those all to levels below to a less than significant impact, which is based on thresholds that are either contained in the city's environmental quality regulations or in CEQA itself.
Okay, thank you. There was expressed concern about the project's impacts, on the trees that are on site. Could you please share with me the measures that our city tree ordinance are going to be applied?
Sure. Let me pull the mitigation measures themselves. They do describe mitigation at a rate as identified in our code, and it requires replacement of trees. For mature trees, I believe it's a 1-to-1, and for protected trees, it's at a 2-to-1 ratio. So protected trees would be, in this instance, they'd be oaks that have a larger caliper tree diameter at breast height. So those are, I believe there's 11 of those to be removed, and they would be replaced 2-to-1, so you'd get 22 back. Some would be on site, and some mitigation would be done in the Daily Ranch area for other species.
Mitigation credits? Okay, understood. Thank you. How are we protecting the neighboring vineyard as construction proceeds, and how would it be buffered from the homes once they're constructed?
Sure. So during construction, there's requirements for dust control. As part of it's part of any construction project. There is going to be fugitive dust on any construction site. It's just it's impossible to fully prevent that, but there are mitigation measures, I believe, and definitely conditions, I know, on the project that require watering of the site to keep dust down, and if they're, I'm trying to remember, O&D by chance know anything beyond what I've just mentioned?
Yeah, primarily watering, but slope stabilization, as slopes are manufactured and can be stabilized, primarily watering.
And will there be buffering once the project is completed?
So the slopes will go quite close, or they'll basically go up to the property line, but the units and the pads for those homes would be set back from the property lines. I don't have the exact measurement, but at least I believe 10 to 15, maybe even 20 feet on the areas that are adjacent to that western property line.
That same property owner is concerned that one of the pads is going to be elevated and be not towering, but be above his property. Can you please explain this to me and to the Planning Commission?
Sure. So the property in reference, I believe it's this is the property on Weiss Way, I believe, and the lot here, lot 10, is the lot that is going to be perched above. The slope here, between the slope and retaining wall, the combination of the two, I believe gets up to about 18 or 19 feet. So it is definitely going to be sitting higher than the adjacent property. That said, the fact that the project has requested a density bonus and has requested has identified the slope here and the need for that as a waiver in order to accommodate the provision of the project. There's not much other than slope stability that we can point to, and that the Planning Commission can take into consideration in order to determine if this is an appropriate grading design.
Due to the state's density bonus law?
Correct. Yes.
The lots are ranging from 6,500 square feet to 14,000 square feet. Could you pull up a map to help clarify for us where the smaller lots will be and the larger lots might be?
Sure. So this is the same map that you'd seen on the previous PowerPoint, but I figure I'd pull it up here so I can zoom in a bit and give you a little bit of a better idea. Oops, I'm sorry. So the largest lot here is just over 14,000 square feet. It's at the what would that be? The southwest corner of Conway and Stanley. The reason that it winds up being so much bigger than others is twofold. One, it's at the end of a cul-de-sac and accessed via a private or a long kind of panhandle lot, we would call this. And the other aspect of it is that it's got a slope that goes down there to the pad from the roadway there. So the usable area of that pad is probably, I would say, probably somewhere in the 7,000 to 8,000 square foot range, although I can't say it with certainty. The smallest lot is at the other end of this this new public street. It's lot 27 there, and it is 6,515 square feet. It's primarily the size is significantly smaller than the largest one there, and primarily in this area, this is where you've got a large water pipeline that's part of the Water Authority, San Diego County Water Authority. So that is been left out of any of the lots there. It's part of the bioretention basin and open space lot here, but based really on the way that easement comes through there. That's where the property lines were drawn. The majority of the lots, I would say, if I was looking at the project as a whole, I would say the majority of the lots are probably somewhere between 7,000 to 7,500 square feet. They're generally, rectangular lots here. As you get towards cul-de-sacs, that changes, and then on the eastern side of the street, because of that easement, there's some differentiation. Sometimes also topography is playing a role in why certain lots may be smaller or larger than others. For instance, these lots here on, lots 21 through 24, they have a significant slope in the rear, so some of that is not usable area. And then, again, the same kind of an idea where you've got certain lots that are at the end of cul-de-sacs that would then be larger in order to just deal with the geometries of it.
Okay, thank you. The residents who reside on Wagon Wheel Court have expressed a legitimate concern that the properties that will be backing up to their lots are going to have two walls, an exterior wall and interior wall, and they're concerned that this creates an alley effect that might encourage vandalism and perhaps even drug sales being shielded off from the streets by the walls. Could you explain the need for having two walls on each lot, and if there's a need, how are these residents protected from anyone trespassing into what they're referring to as alleys?
So this is the area, and I'll show you a couple different views here. The properties on Wagon Wheel here are these on the bottom of the screen. This line here is the boundary of the subdivision. The blue line there represents the location that a wall would be if it was placed at the bottom of a slope. The orange line here is where a wall or fence would be placed if it were placed at the top of a slope. This is looking into the site, so if you were looking across this way, as it exists today, you've got the properties on Wagon Wheel that back up to the site here. This is their walls. There's a drainage culvert that's part of their development as well, and then this short retaining wall becomes part of their project, or as part of their development as well. So property line is basically where that dashed red line is. The issue that winds up coming up is if you're looking at doing some sort of a privacy or screening fence or wall, it would typically be at the top of a slope, because putting a 6-foot wall and these are very exaggerated drawings. Don't pay attention to the actual pad elevations there, but just for kind of the purposes of seeing what this might be looking like. 6-foot fence or wall at the bottom of a slope is not going to provide any type of privacy or protection, screening, etc. of the lot there. Putting it at the top of the slope, though, creates that kind of no man's land concern. So that area between the fence at the top of a slope and whether there's a fence or not for the at the bottom of the slope, it's something that would need to be, it's either the property fence here, or the developments, the new developments wall or fence, or it would just be the existing wall or fence there. So there is going to be potentially a gap between what might be here and what would basically wind up kind of being 15, 20 feet off of that over here. And then there would be a slope down from the top of the pad there down to where that existing wall or any potential new wall would be. The area there, it's a little bit difficult to maintenance of those areas where you've got a slope that leads down behind a home is always been a challenge. It's difficult because it's kind of that out of sight, out of mind thing, right? If you have a house, whether you have a fence on the top of a slope or not, you're not seeing down below. For that reason, conditions of approval have been included that require the HOA to maintain these slopes, if regardless of where the fences wind up being placed. If there are two fences and that area becomes kind of only used or only accessible to the HOA, and they deal with that maintenance, that works. There's other ideas where it could be still part of someone's backyard, but HOA would have to be provided with access through there in order to maintain. But it would also have to be secured from the public street, so there would be no access. There would only be gated access, I should say, into the area back there. There is a little bit of a dilemma because currently, the property could only provide fencing up to this point. So the area here that might be problematic, there is the potential that the developer here could work with the property owners to maybe provide a gate or something, a lockable gate that goes all the way to their existing wall, and then that would actually probably make the situation better than it currently is, because it would even preclude access into this culvert area right there.
There is going to be a locked gate, correct?
Correct. It won't affect and it won't deal with this area in here that's on the adjacent property, unless that's something that the HOA for that existing property and the developer wanted to get together on. But there will be a gate and a locked access that the public cannot just get into this area here.
Okay, so at least at the starting point of the current plans, then actually this is more of a benefit to those residents who have expressed that they're already having current graffiti problems on the back of the wall. This will prevent that from continuing. So, nearly each of the communications received were concerned that this project is in violation of our general plan and the zoning requirements. The densities are being increased, violating both the general plan and the zoning. Could you please explain how the state law affects this and how we're restricted in responding?
Sure. So density bonus law really kind of ties a jurisdiction's hands on being able to hold properties to the densities that would otherwise be allowed pursuant to the general plan and the zoning requirements for the site. If a property or if an applicant is willing to deed restrict whatever the percentage of units that that would be required based on that sliding scale I kind of mentioned earlier, if they're willing to do that, and then they are entitled to increased density regardless of what the land use designation or the zoning code say.
Okay, my next question, or their next concern, tags along with that. Many were concerned that duplexes cannot be allowed on this property. So could you explain why we can approve duplexes?
So that's been requested as a concession for their the density bonus project. They're requesting it as a modification to a zoning standard, which that is something that that we've not seen before, but we don't have any reason to say no, that doesn't work. I mean, it is intended to be interpreted liberally in favor of producing housing, so that's something that
I understand. So state law is superseding
correct
our general limit. Finally, in one letter from an attorney, there was an expressed argument that 13 units are being demolished, and as per the bonus density law, we're required to, or the applicant is required to replace each unit. We're only replacing 10. Could you explain why and what formula might be used to arrive to your conclusions?
Sure. This was something that was considered by the applicant prior to or as part of their submittal process and review process, and it's something we analyzed in the staff report. There is no data available on the level of income of the residents of the units right now. There are 15 existing units, 13 are being demolished. Of those 13, 12 are rental units. So the way that that statute reads is that the applicant has to replace at least the same number of affordable units as would have been there previously. If that number is unknown as far as how many of the units are being rented to low-income families, then we are required to use to presume that it's the same ratio as is required or as exists throughout the city, based on data from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. That number is, I believe, 78 and change percent. So 78% of the 12 units, rental units to be demolished, winds up being 9.3, 9.4, something like that. So it rounds up to 10 units.
Okay, thank you. Last thing I want to say, Greg, you are the most well-dressed person here in the auditorium. I will give you a reward after the hearing.
Thank you, Commissioner Barber. Other clarifying questions from commissioners to Mr. Feinstein.
Yes, I just have a couple. I'm a little bit confused about the number of units again. The staff report says there are 13 units. When I was on site, I thought I saw 14, but you've repeated a couple of times now that there are 15 on site.
Yeah, the staff report, I believe, and if it was not presented accurately, I apologize, but I believe it says that there are 13 that will be demolished and 2 to remain. So,
Well, it might say that someplace else. On the very first paragraph, it says that 7 parcels containing a total of 13 residential units.
my apologies then.
Okay, so there are 15,
Correct.
and there are 13 being demolished.
That's correct.
Right, okay. And then I had some questions about the fill lot 10, and I guess you've already answered those. But that's going to be an 18-foot fill? Your presentation said 10 feet plus.
Yeah, I believe it's 18 when I.
And we set the criteria at 10 feet because of aesthetics, right?
Generally.
And usually we allow higher walls or higher cut fills and lower cuts or whatever on internal walls, right? When they're not visible to the outside. We don't usually allow them on an exterior side of a development.
I won't say that we don't allow them, but we require a higher level of review.
Right, okay. And then I see the the mitigation for trees is a little bit confusing because it says they should be replaced, but then it also says that there's going to be land purchased to make up for the trees. But then there's some clarification but don't duplicate a tree. If you buy mitigation, then you don't also have to plant a tree. That's a little bit confusing to me. I'm not sure why we would have 2 kinds of mitigation, and then we would say you could do one or the other, or a combination, and instead of having one mitigation that says you have to mitigate for trees, do this. Instead, there's 2 mitigations for trees.
Commissioner Paul, there's many trees on site. Some of them are oak, some are coast live oak, other are eucalyptus, some are ornamentals. So trees are not necessarily trees altogether. They distinguish between oaks and non-natives, eucalyptus and others. So you have 2 different standards. You have biology. We have 2 mitigation measures for biologies 3 and 4 that specify very unique mitigation measures, 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 or 1.5-to-1, based on the type of species you're doing that for. Some of those tree replacements will be on site within the detention basin or other areas on the edge. The other ones will be within Daly Ranch, where we'll have a preservation, and they'll be planted there at the prescribed mitigation measure ratio.
Okay,
That's distinguishing.
thank you. And then Fish and Wildlife made a suggestion for how much mitigation, and I saw the staff response was, we disagree.
You'll have to give me a moment to look at that one real quick.
Yeah, there was a letter submitted from Fish and Wildlife to the draft environmental document with suggestions for tree mitigation.
If I can, I'd like to defer that question and have the environmental consultant speak to that. I don't have the information in front of me. It's on my computer over there.
Okay. And then there's also some birds that are nesting in a tree, and the mitigation for that is just not to do construction or demolition of the tree while they're in the nest. There's no requirement to preserve the nest or anything.
So typically what you'll see is there's what's considered nesting season.
Right.
There's a time of year when birds are nesting and either incubating or hatching or caring for the baby birds. And during that time is when they cannot, 2 things, either you can't you can't tear down or cut down the trees there, or you have to have a bird survey less than 72 hours prior to actually doing that. So if birds are observed, if nests are observed, then you would have to avoid cutting that down at that point. You'd have to wait till whenever that is not till those nests are no longer occupied or being used as such.
Okay, so do we think that the birds will come back after construction and build in the new trees?
I'm not a biologist. I don't have any knowledge of how that works. Maybe the environmental consultant could provide some information and insight on that.
Okay. And then also, there's going to be a lot of dirt, I guess. 40,000 cubic yards or something of fill dirt.
Yeah, so you have the part of the project that I guess you call it Street H or Street F. You end up with excess cut that gets moved to the more northerly portion. But even then, there is 40,000 cubic yards of import. We would cover that with our condition under improvements, condition number 11. With the encroachment permit process and the traffic control, that typically also includes the hauling, both the hauling routes and the hauling times. I would just say that the project Pradera, which was next to this, was 160,000 cubic yards, and so we worked with both their traffic engineer and their engineers, and came up with both haul routes and haul times, and max number of truck trips a day, and it worked real smoothly there. We were concerned with that project because of its proximity to the school, as we would be with this project. This one is a little further away and probably easier, can bring the dirt in away from the schools. But I think primarily we will be looking at the time of day that earth hauling can be imported.
Okay. About how many truck trips is 41,000 cubic yards? I know you know this.
Yeah, divided by 20. Whatever that, yeah. 800.
Okay, I think that's all of my questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, other questions? Yes, Commissioner Spear.
Couple questions. One of them I have is regarding the findings for, let's see, number 8. Project would not cause, in relation to the grading that's done, would not cause substantial environmental damage. What I'm interested in is, I think we had, if I looked on the sections, if I remember right, about 27 feet of max fill. Is that in depth? Is that correct? Which exceeds the 10 by substantial amounts. Is that correct?
I believe so. I'll pull that up here.
While you're waiting, I did the math. It's 2,000 truck trips.
So right there on the left, I think the max, 27.5 feet is our max fill depth. We have 10, I guess, is our limitation typically. We also have property lines very close to 10-foot, 11.5-foot max retaining walls with 2-in-1 backfill behind the retaining walls. We also have certain slopes that exceed the 2-to-1 ratio. A number of conditions that exceed our typical recommendations or design standards. On this finding that we have, I'm interested in kind of understanding how we get to this finding with these conditions on site? What was the rationale? What was the thought process behind that?
Sure. I mentioned before that the grading exemptions were part of the request of for the density bonus. There was a waiver requested on that. As such, as long as they are found to be stable and based on the geotech reports that have been done to date and additional design that will be done prior to construction in order to make sure that the walls and the slopes are adequately designed. There's not much beyond that we can look at in order to make any findings, because the density bonus provisions that are in statute, state law, preclude that.
So the answer, I guess, would be based on geotechnical findings that have been submitted, correct?
As far as the stability of the slopes, yes.
And the fill depth, both of those. The other question I have is in relation to as you've mentioned, the scope of the commission is to, I guess, to determine whether there are safety concerns. That would be one potential issue that would supersede the density bonus provisions. As I read, help me understand if this is correct, but I referenced a Guide to California Density Bonus Law, a publication by John Goetz and Tom Sakay. They mentioned two items. They mentioned the first, as you did, which is the public health and safety environmental problem issue. But they also mentioned another. It's the concession or incentive does not result in identifiable and actual cost reductions. And I believe this is in reference to the idea that density bonuses are concessions that are costly to the city, but are mandated to provide an incentive to offset the costs associated with providing this type of housing, right? To your knowledge, is that also a correct factor in the scope of the commission?
So the concession that's been requested is the ability to do duplex units. The other issues, the grading issues that we're talking about, those are related to, or those are waivers from development standards that are allowed in order to accommodate the project. They are different from concessions. The concessions that they've requested, and I think as part of the information that I provided, the memo that I emailed earlier today and that I placed on the dais, it does have information and kind of a spreadsheet that the applicant had provided earlier in the process that is now available here and has been placed on the dais, that identifies, I think, $130,000 give or take cost reduction by doing duplex units rather than single family homes. So that's where the cost reduction aspect comes in, but the waivers are required. Are I believe that's what's those are required to be granted as long as they are not creating an adverse impact. I didn't recall. I don't recall.
And I just jump in with the standard, because I'm actually just looking at the case right at the moment, if that's okay, Adam. The standard for a waiver is the city may refuse a waiver or a reduction only if the waiver or reduction would have a specific adverse impact upon health, safety, or the physical environment, or would have an adverse impact on historic resource, which doesn't apply here.
So you're not reading anything in that discusses the cost reductions as a part of that?
No, as Adam stated, that's different. The concession or incentive, that's where we're talking about the cost reduction. With a waiver, cost doesn't come into it.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And related to the concession, where you're talking about the cost reductions, the state statute shifts the burden from the applicant to the city. So the city actually has a burden of proof to show that there is not a cost reduction. So just so you know.
In terms of the concessions, could you please review I think you had mentioned that the duplex, there was a little bit of a different approach, that the duplex is a concession, in this case considered a concession. Could you list What are the actual concessions being requested, and how that relates to the number allowed?
So the duplex allowance is the only concession. The other items are all waivers from development standards. I can pull those up if you give me a moment.
And I believe there are 3 allowable concessions or incentives, and this is the one.
All right. So development standard waivers or reductions that they're requesting are a reduction in front yard setbacks from either 15 feet in the R1 zone or 25 feet in the RE to 15 feet with a, to 10 and a half feet with the garage door being at least 15 feet back. Interior side yard setback requirements, typically in the R1 zone, one side has to be 10 feet, the other is 5. In the RE zone, 10 feet is required on both sides. Their request is to have that reduced to 5 feet necessary in order to be able to provide their project development. Front, side, and rear setback requirements for accessory buildings, they've requested that those be modified as well to be the same as what's been required, or what they've requested for the side and rear, I guess front, side, and rear setbacks for the primary structure, unless the code as it exists today is provides a more liberal setback there. They've requested reduction in lot size from either 10,000 in the R110 zone or 20,000 in the RE20 zone, down to 6515 as the smallest, that area or that lot, and the couple near that, that's on the southern part of the site, which is the R110 area. So it's the area that would have smaller lots comparatively already. They've requested a reduction in average lot width. R1 typically has an 80-foot, RE has 100. They've requested 60. The lot width at the street, they've requested a reduction in the R1 zone from 35 feet down to 25. The RE zone already has a minimum of 20, and they've not made a request to change that. Let's see then. Oops. And then the allowance for a lot coverage increase from either 30% in the RE or 40% in the R1. They've requested an increase up to 50%. The max floor area ratio would be, currently it's the requirement is 0.5, so 50% of the square footage of the lot would be the amount of floor area they could have in the on the buildings. They've requested that to be up to 60 or to 0.6, so 60% of that area. And then they've also requested suburban residential road standard, which would be a more or a narrower road and allow parking only on one side, and that is for street G, I believe it is. It's this one here. It's this here. So it's a narrower area here, and it would only allow parking on one side. Parking on all the cul-de-sacs is also precluded, so that it provides adequate fire department turnaround. They've requested grading exemptions, as we noted, along in the 3 areas, on 2 of them on that back up to lots 10 and 24, backing up to Weiss Way. And then the other one on the north side, which is this area over there. And they've also requested cul-de-sac instead, or a hammerhead instead of a cul-de-sac here as their turnaround. Storm drain typically is not to be located underneath a sidewalk or parkway. They've requested that a small portion be allowed to be located under the right-of-way. And then the Conway storm drain easement typically is a 10-foot requirement. They've requested that to be reduced to 5. I'm sorry, it's typically 20. They've requested that to be reduced to 10, and that's the list of them.
So all those are considered waivers?
Yes.
How do we differentiate in definition between then concession and waiver?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
How do we then differentiate the difference between a concession and a waiver?
That's a very good question. It's very, I might defer, actually, Dare, if you can maybe provide us some guidance there.
Yeah, I can try to do that. So a waiver is a waiver of a development standard, and development standard is defined as a site or construction condition, including but not limited to a height limitation or setback requirement. It's, you know, that's the definition. I know it's a little confusing whether something is a concession or an incentive or.
And the definition of a concession?
Definition for consent.
Okay, hold on, let me find that one.
Because I'm seeing an unlimited number of waivers and a limited number of concessions.
Yes, that's
So-
right. That's right. I don't have a definition in front of me for concession, but my understanding is it's something other than, you know, it doesn't fall into this development standard specific definition. I understand the attorney for the applicant is here, so they might have some more information for you. I can also keep looking as we're sitting here, if I can dig it up.
I actually, if you'd like, I do have from our zoning code, I printed that section for Article 67, and I do have that definition for incentives or concessions, if you'd like. Incentives or concessions means such regulatory incentives and concessions as stipulated in Government Code 65915K to include but not be limited to the reduction of site development standards or zoning code requirements, approval of mixed-use zoning in conjunction with the housing project, or any other regulatory incentive that would result in identifiable cost reductions to enable the provision of the provision of housing for the designated income group or qualifying residents.
So there we're talking about reduction in costs or making things more affordable, correct?
Correct.
So again, I don't know that differentiates the distinct difference between the two. That's generally to both, that applies to both of those, what you just read?
That was the definition of an incentive or concession. Those two are used interchangeably. That's not a waiver. That's not a waiver.
Okay,
It's
okay,
different.
I gotcha. And I'm a little unclear on how the one listed concession in this case, when I take the definition applied for waivers, I'm trying to understand the difference between this concession and how that doesn't fit under the waiver definition.
So, as a concession, it is. I would consider that this is a regulatory incentive that would result in identifiable cost reductions. So, it is a change in the regulatory nature of the zoning out there to allow a different type of product. It's not a reduction in a setback or an increase in the height or this or that. It's actually the type of unit.
Okay, that helps. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Okay.
I'm sorry, so that brought up one other thought I had. I'm sorry. So nothing precludes the developer from doing the whole thing as duplexes, right? We would approve the whole thing if there was all duplexes.
Can I just stop? Oh, that's kind of a hypothetical. I'm usually against hypotheticals. Hasn't been asked at this point, so I'm not sure. I mean, I guess you can ask staff if you want, but.
I just did.
We haven't analyzed that, so I really couldn't give you an answer.
Okay.
Can I follow up with that question a little bit?
Okay.
And that is just, I guess, in reference to my previous question, which was, how do we define the difference between the two? When we define a concession, let's say we say, yes, this is definitely a concession, like in this case. How do we define the allowable size of that concession? Why not shoot for the moon and call it 1 as opposed to, no, that's 10? So I guess in my questioning, maybe in research, is not only the number of concessions, but what limits the size of the concession is also a question that I have.
I think that I would point to what Senior Deputy City Attorney had mentioned with regard to the burden being on the city to make any, or to say that this does not qualify or is not needed as a way to make a project financially feasible. We have not made any determination to the contrary on this project.
And a great deal is dependent on the proposal itself, correct? I mean, obviously.
Correct, yeah. I mean, we look at what's put before us and the kind of, well, if someone had come in with a project that was, 5 stories and duplex or whatever, we would look at that project. But that's not what's been presented.
Sounds like a hypothetical to me.
Exactly, that's why I said we would look at that project if that was presented. Exactly.
Okay, other questions? I think
I have one.
Commissioner McCarroll.
Adam, on the topic of hypotheticals, in response to one of the notes in here of the opposition is the fact that there aren't any renderings or any materials put forth yet at this point. So I understand that means, the surrounding neighbors don't even know what they'll be looking at. We don't have pictures of the landscape or any landscape plans, et cetera, to help mitigate some of their concerns. At what point do we see the actual project itself with the proposed materials to better understand the aesthetics and the heights and, all those details?
Sure.
When does that happen?
So part of the development process right now, we're looking at the subdivision of the land, we're looking at the grading exemption, and we're looking at the annexation. The standard development process requires design review for a production subdivision and requires a plot plan for the duplex units for a multifamily project. The typical requirement for design review for the production homes is done at a staff level. However, we have required and put conditions of approval into the project to actually require that to be brought in front of the Planning Commission for their consideration. So that would be something that would be available for review and consideration by the neighborhood as well. The plot plan for the duplex units, for the 10 multifamily units there, that's something that will go through its own review internally amongst various departments to make sure that all development standards are addressed and that, or development standards that have not been waived or reduced, I should say, are addressed.
Thank you.
Okay, actually, most of my questions have been answered. My last question would be around the LAFCO thing. So our approval, if we were to approve it tonight, that would trigger an application to LAFCO regarding the annexation. Is that correct?
Your role tonight is making a recommendation to City Council.
And so, I'm sorry, so once council, if council approves, then it goes to LAFCO for
Correct.
consideration, right? Okay. And that's the same for the next one as well.
Correct.
Any other questions for clarification to staff? Okay. Does the applicant have a presentation? She's turning it on for you.
Is it on now? Okay, there we go. Good evening. I don't really have a presentation, but just would like to speak for a few minutes. My name is John Kay, and I'm representative of the applicant, Escondido North, LLC. I want to thank you, commissioners, and the staff for considering our project. Just a bit about our background. We were the developer of the Pradera and Lexington tracts to the west of this. It was an assemblage of 10 parcels into 113 homes. Assemblages are difficult. Requires a lot of coordination with multiple property owners and landowners and making the site plan come together. But I think in the end, you end up getting much more cohesive communities and a lot less engineering issues, as I'm sure Owen can attest to. A lot of hard work has gone into this project. We submitted this project 18 months ago, went through 6 plan checks. The project has been thoroughly reviewed and scrutinized by all the departments at the city. And again, thanks to everybody and the decades of experience that's gone into this, the development team, the consultant team, and of course the city staff team as well. I feel there's many positive aspects to this project. For one, we feel like we are providing homes for 54 families, 10 of which will be affordable families. I will say it's also big in helping the city meet the RENA goals, if you're familiar with that. And also, just one note on per the density bonus law, there are provisions where we could have gone up to as many as 60 units by doing different formulas. So we kind of went with what we felt was still a good project design, but met all the goals of what was trying to be achieved. We think there's still large single-family lots. As you heard, I think Adam said they're 7,000 to 7,500 typical. They average 8,600 square foot lots in average. If you look around all the suburban development that's been done in the area over the last recent decades, most recently they were 10,000 square foot lots, but to the northwest was 4,500 square foot lots. To the southeast was 6,500 to 7,500 square foot lots. So we still believe that, this is a really nice lot. They still provide for ample backyards, a lot of the lots up to 30 to 80 feet in depth. And then there's the 10 affordable homes. And we have elected to partner with Habitat for Humanity, who is also currently building out a project in El Norte. 10 of the same units are what is being proposed here. I've had the good fortune to work with Habitat, not only in San Diego County, but other counties. And they do a phenomenal job of, one, the upfront family selection process. And a lot isn't just about qualifying, but it's family need. And then also they do a tremendous job of the long-term stewardship of keeping these homes affordable. And I know somebody from Habitat will probably get up here and speak, and they'll talk a little more, but I think it's a really advantageous thing to have some group like Habitat involved with the affordable housing. And even on those affordables, what is nice about the duplex design is it still has single-family living. It's got 2-car direct access garage, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, and yards. And one last positive feature is on the northwest portion, we are leaving some permanent open space. It could have been graded and filled for various reasons, but one that's always nice to keep some open space. There is a significant open space. It's pretty rare for infill projects, especially one of this size. Just also, I'd like to touch a little bit on the VMT, vehicle miles traveled. It's a new and relatively complex state law, and I'd like to congratulate the city on the passage of their VMT exchange program last week. I think our traffic engineer is here, and I think he said it's one of the first cities to actually accomplish this. And again, congratulations on that program, because it does allow a viable path to how mitigation can occur. And again, it's beyond my pay grade as far as understanding it, but if you have any questions, our engineer is here. And we also have other of our experts here for any of your questions. Again, from Linscott Law and Greenspan, our traffic engineer, who's a preeminent traffic engineering firm. We have our land use legal consultants from Lounsbury Ferguson. We have our CEQA and biology expert from Carlson Strategic Land Solutions. And we also have our civil engineer from Pascal Lorette. So again, I'd just like to thank the city staff and that say, we do believe it's a good project, and we completely agree with the conclusions on page 12 as written by the staff. So again, thank you, and we're here for any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions from commissioners to the applicant or the applicant's partners? Commissioner Barber.
Well, you already sat down, but that's my fault. I didn't speak quickly enough. So I was interested and impressed that you were working with Habitat for Humanity. I was just curious, did you approach them? Did they approach you? How did the working relationship materialize? And is my understanding, have you donated that land, that those duplexes we built, to Habitat for Humanity?
Yes, I should mention we are donating the land. So it'll be graded and improved, which is a big thing for habitats because a lot of times now they have to buy their land. And I think even if you look at the El Norte project, they had to buy the land. It had some significant site improvements to make it work. So yeah, we are making the donation. As I said, I've worked with different habitats in different counties. I actually helped a bit with just the planning of that El Norte site. But got to know, starting within Orange County, that Habitat affiliate up there, and have gotten to meet all of, quite a few of the Habitat affiliates. And like I said, they do really great work and really believe in their whole program.
It's interested.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Spear?
So you had mentioned Habitat. How would this work? Is Habitat going to be the entity that provides the grading for the entire site, or just for their portion? How does that work?
No, the whole site will be graded not by Habitat, but by essentially the next step in the process by the home builder. And so they will grade a finished pad with all the utilities to the site, and then basically the parcel will be donated to Habitat, who will then do all the vertical construction and home sales.
But grading will occur by one entity, is it?
Yes, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Any other questions? No.
That's it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let's see. So now we can, we'll open the public hearing for comments. If there are speakers, I don't have the list of speakers with me. Perhaps Jessica, you could mention their name, or? They should. Thanks. Okay, please know that you have approximately 3 minutes to offer your comments. The first one, Barry Baker, Escondido. Thank you, sir, and would you please just mention your name and where you're from?
I'm Barry Baker. I'm a resident of Escondido since 1956. I'm in favor of the project. I think the assembly of many parcels to have one larger buildable parcel makes for good consistency of home design and landscape. I'm also in favor of the project because I think it'll make it safer for school children that go to the middle school. Conway has been improved with a walkway, but it'll be much better when the road is widened and got real sidewalks for school children. Thank you.
You. Andrew Brunn, is that correct? Or apologies if I don't get your name correct. Could you please, I'm sorry, sir, but you'll have to come for the recording and archive. It's important that we have a record. Appreciate your coming forward.
Yeah. My name is Andrew Brunn. I'm a resident of Escondido for over 20 years, and I live nearby. I just wanted to voice my opposition to the way the project is currently being planned, and the density is, in my opinion, it's much too high for that area. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Mr. Patrick Klopchin.
Well, I'm Patrick Klopchin. I'm also a resident of Escondido, and like Andy, I just want to voice my opposition to the project. I don't think it's a good fit for the area. We've had a lot of, projects built there. We've been in opposition to some of them, but we've worked with the builders, and I think that should be thought about in this project too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Kelsey Quist.
Good evening, Honorable Chair and Commissioners. My name is Kelsey Quist, and my firm Rutan & Tucker represents the homeowners, Dr. Greg Quist and Cindy Quist, who reside at the single-family home located at 2166 Weiss Way, which directly adjoins the proposed project site. In my capacity as the Quist legal counsel, I have previously prepared written correspondences to the city which detail the significant deficiencies with this proposed project. Most notably, its failure to comply with the requirements of CEQA, state density bonus law, and its inconsistency with the city's general plan, land use designations, and applicable zoning districts. The city must require the preparation of a full environmental impact report for the project to comply with state law and to avoid costly future litigation. While my clients are not opposed to new development, the proper protocols and legal procedures must be followed in order to ensure the preservation of property rights within the community. The final MND falls woefully short of legal compliance. These fatal flaws must be addressed before the project can proceed. Failure to do so exposes the city to significant liability and protracted litigation. For example, the final MND asserts for the first time that density bonus law allows the city to authorize a different use than otherwise permitted as a zoning concession. Duplexes are not permitted uses on the site, and density bonus law does not allow the city to amend permitted uses without a general plan or zoning code amendment. The standard for granting a zoning concession is significantly different than the standard for granting waivers. Waivers revolve around whether failure to grant the waiver would physically preclude development of the project. A zoning concession, however, must result in identifiable and actual cost reductions. Yet these actual cost reductions have not been identified as part of the final MND and were never discussed in the draft MND. Even had these cost reductions been included, the proposed zoning concession, along with the 10 significant waivers the applicant received, result in unique impacts that were not adequately analyzed in the MND. At a minimum, the city must require the applicant to provide evidence that duplexes result in identifiable and actual cost reductions, and such information to date has not been provided to the public. The final MND likewise fails to respond to substantial concerns regarding transportation and traffic safety, and includes mitigation measures that do nothing to ensure the project's impacts are actually reduced to a less than significant level. There is no evidence to support that adding 4 crosswalks and 1 sidewalk will reduce VMT. When the effectiveness of a mitigation measure is not apparent, a reviewing court will not defer to the agency's determination. For these reasons, my clients request that the city require that the applicant submit a full EIR. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, is this a time where I would request either the city attorney or the applicant's attorney to address that attorney's
I think
points?
we should probably work through the rest of
Okay.
the oral comments, and then we'll go to questions. Let's see. Stephen Berkowitz?
Good evening. My name is Stephen Berkowitz, and I'm a resident of Escondido, though for a much shorter period of time than all of the people who have preceded me. I live on Weiss Way, and quite honestly, my wife and I like that area very much. It's quiet and secluded, and this project does nothing to protect that. And my concern is the project, as it's scoped and presented to the public today, does nothing about noise and traffic. Traffic has to exit that development on Conway Street and on Stanley Avenue, both of which are fairly narrow, and nowhere are there plans for improving that traffic access. There are blind spots on Stanley Avenue. There are intersections that are not stop signed, and I think this exposes everybody who lives there and who will live there to significant traffic risk.
Thank you. Ms. Cindy Quist?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Cindy Quist, and I live at 2166 Weiss Way with my husband, Greg. We have lived here for 35 years, raised our children here, and while we understood this day would eventually come and the empty field next to us would be developed, I'm here tonight to ask you to slow down this process and consider all of the items we and our neighbors have raised and give the city a development that you would be proud of. As proposed, this is not a development we should be constructing. As a mother of two, what concerns me the most about this development is the safety of the residents who would live here and the safety of the residents in this neighborhood around the development. I didn't see any mention of the number of cars per household in any of the developer's documents. What I did see on page 82 in the draft MND was an estimated average number of persons per residence of 3.21. What I can tell you is what I see every day, because I drive the streets there every day. A very large number of average cars per residence is what I see. We have seen more than 20 cars for 4 residences at the location slated for demolition. That's more than 5 cars per house. What I can tell you is that global statistics for persons per household or cars per household does not apply in our area. And this proposed development will create a parking and therefore traffic nightmare at the density proposed. We've experienced the same problem on Weiss Way. Near the top of our street, neighboring houses have been parking their cars there, creating a safety hazard. So we have petitioned the county for 2 years, and it took us that long. And now we have no parking signs on our street. Yay, but it took us 2 years. Speaking of parking, when the Pradera development was put in a few years ago, a series of no parking signs were installed on Stanley Avenue. The answers to comments indicated there will be limited or no parking on Stanley, Laner, and Conway on page 25 of the final MND. We've got many multi-generational families in our area. Where are they going to park their cars? Another item I'm asking you to consider before we rush into this development is about the Hawks. They've lived there in the eucalyptus grove for at least 35 years since I've lived there. Mr. K and Mr. Bird met us on our property and told us they would not remove the trees holding these hawks or harass them during breeding season. We don't see that assurance in the documents, but it seems to me this needs to be part of the final approval process. Finally, I want to address another item of concern we do not feel has been adequately addressed, and that is the dust, dirt, and noise that will be generated during the construction. My husband and I planted a vineyard on our property 5 years ago, and this past year we sold our first vintage. We are very concerned about dust and dirt on our property getting into the house and damaging maybe permanently our vineyard. We would like this development to include, as a good neighbor, which Mr. Baker talked about a lot, being a good neighbor. I've had many conversations with him on the phone. Some assurances the construction phase will not damage our plants or house or cause any health issues for us and our neighbors. In summary, I don't understand what the rush is for this development. As it stands, it is not a good development for us here in Escondido, and I thank you for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Earl Brown?
I wanted to talk about the Iris Lane project.
Oh, okay, that's a different one. Okay, thank you. Mr. Greg Quist?
I'm the guy that left those folders with you, so you can pick those up, please. Good evening. My name is Greg Quist, and I live at 2166 Weiss Way. Our property is directly west of the proposed development and shares a total of 600 feet of property line with the proposed development. Let me start by telling you I'm an entrepreneur, a businessman who understands the desires to maximize profit, a scientist, a strong believer in property rights and the ability for property owners to use their land as they see fit. But tonight I want to cover a couple of specific issues we have with the development as proposed. The first issue is density. Please look at the first page of the handouts I gave you, please. This is directly from the agenda packet on page 25. I've added calculations to show how the number of homes in this section of the development, with a maximum of 2 homes per acre per the general plan, this is the northern section, indicates 16 homes maximum. 33 are planned for the project. This is more than 2 times the general plan. If you apply the maximum density bonus, which is 50%, which we believe doesn't apply here because duplexes are not allowed under the general plan, you get 24 homes, yet 33 are planned. There's a math problem here. Add to this erroneous high density the proposed granting of 10 development exemptions, including setbacks, grading, lot size, street widths, parking, and drainage, and you can have some really awful consequences. Here's one awful consequence. Please see page 2 on the handout I provided. This is from the tentative map provided to you on your agenda. It shows that the lot 10 pad has an elevation 12 feet above our property here, before a house is built on top of it. Page 3 is a photo of the workshop, which is 10 feet from the fence on our property line. The lot 10 pad will be higher than the roof of this building, which is 11 feet high. Imagine now adding a 1 or 2 story house on top of that, and now you've got a structure 25 to 35 feet above our heads, just a few feet from our property line. Picture 4 is a picture of what our view from this spot looks like now. Build this project and we'll be looking at a wall of dirt 12 to 18 feet high with a house on top of this wall of dirt towering 2 or 3 stories above our property, literally feet above our fence. This will completely destroy our privacy, threaten our security, diminish the value of our property, and it's completely unnatural and inconsistent with the surrounding community, obviously. I would suggest this is far less than significant as indicated in the draft MND, and this is one of the many deficiencies in the current project design. Also note on page 2 the dead-end driveway adjacent to my property, providing no room for fire equipment, especially if there's parking on both sides of the street. You could place these 4 lots in this narrow private drive at significant fire risk. I ask you to return this project to staff, request a full EIR to be performed, and reform this development to turn it into a project that not only works for our Orange County friends who are proposing it, but more importantly, the neighbors and citizens and residents of Escondido. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this project.
Thank you. Mr. Gregory Welsh.
Good evening. Thanks for allowing us to speak. My name is Gregory Welsh. I live on 2139 Weiss Way, across the street from the northern part of this development. I would encourage you folks to send this back to staff. This is not a good plan as it is laid out. I'm not anti-development. As the Quists and others said, we always knew this area would be developed at one point in time. When I moved to the area 20 years ago and raised my family there and sent my kids off to school just recently, we knew it would be developed, and we thought it would be developed in concert with the area that we purchased into. The investment that we made for our family that now seems to be very contrary to what we understood it to be. We always knew it would be developed. We knew there would be hopefully 20,000 square foot lots in that area, as Greg mentioned. But now this plan with the density, it's not right. And it's contrary to everything that we believed we were investing in. And I have supreme concerns about not only the density, but also the safety aspects when you look at the roads leading into this area. Both Conway and Stanley were originally designed to be small, rural roads that now will be very differently used by all these cars and the 20,000 loads of dirt that will be coming into our area if this plan gets approved. So respectfully, I would like to just again say that I disapprove of this and hope that you will reconsider this plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tom Kennedy?
Good evening. My name is Tom Kennedy. I reside at 1163 Honeysuckle Way and have since '99. And during that time, several hundred homes have been built in the neighborhoods around us. And I've only once actively come before this commission to complain about it, not complain, but interact, as the one that was built right behind my home. And at that time, the concerns of the neighbors were listened to by the planning commission, and we worked with the developer and came to a satisfactory resolution. I hope we can get there in this case. I'm not opposed to development, as are my neighbors, even though I moved in an area hoping I would live around the RE20 zone. I get it. Smaller lots are where we want to go. But while those other homes may not be what we wanted, they weren't as egregiously bad as this one. Here we have a developer seeking to bend and break both local planning codes, section 33-1414A4, and state law, which is similar to that. And the manner in which the density bonus is being applied here fails these standards in a naked attempt to make larger profit, irrespective of the Habitat Humanity portion, which is great. But this is all about profit maximization. The developer fails to meet the requirements of law when it comes to replacing the low-income rental homes that are there existing. There are 14 of them, most of them about, well, I guess there's a question if it's 14 or 15 or 13, but they're about 40 by 40, all been there, about the same, they're probably the same vintage, and anyone who drives down that street can tell that the inhabitants of that type of property are low income. You don't have to ask them how much they make. Drive down Conway and look at those buildings. You will see those are low-income rentals. And if they're not, somebody's getting took. But the developer is trying to use the citywide average as a cop-out to say, hey, we're going to demolish 12 of these, but we're only replacing 10. That's just ridiculous, and it's another portion of this where they're bending to the extreme the interpretations that are allowed. And there's nothing in 33-1414A4 that talks about using citywide average. That's something that they've made up out of whole cloth. To cram all these units into a small site, they're asking for this laundry list of exemptions that many of you asked about, including grading, fire safety, the parking, the setbacks. The fire department did express some concerns as listed in the ISMND, but this has been kind of waved away. That, yeah, we're going to have this, not going to have a cul-de-sac, we're going to have the turnaround. Andy Brunn has a big part of his property that's set for fire department turnaround, even though we have a cul-de-sac on Honeysuckle Way. There's also big problems with the parking. Stanley is no parking all the way from Ash to Conway. And here we're going to have these people leaking out of these places that don't have proper parking because they're crammed together and it's all driveway. They're going to be splitting out there. I've been in public sector for 30 years. I've done a lot of CEQA work, and I believe that the use of the ISMND here is inappropriate. The developer should be asked to cure both all the density bonus issues, be denied a good portion of the laundry list of variances and things he's asked to do, and be asked to do a full EIR on this project. I'm not opposed to having new neighbors on these parcels. I knew it would come, and I welcome any reasonably planned project. Unfortunately, what you have before you fails in so many ways. I urge you to send them back to the drawing board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Armando Romo?
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Armando Romo. I live in Pradera, the adjacent community. So I'm not necessarily against the project. I'm neutral at best at the moment. I agree with a lot of what's being said. I don't think this is a well laid out plan. Have a mixture of comments and questions. I understand the questions won't be answered right now, most likely. So my main concern is the alley. You guys put up the picture. That was helpful. Thank you for speaking to that. I don't think the blue line option should even be considered. That's incredibly too close. I don't know the standoff distance requirements, but that would be 4 feet at most. And then the orange line's still too close. It would still create an alley effect. If that was considered for approval, we would definitely want a condition to be issued that a gate and fence type system would have to be installed. We could speak to graffiti, loitering, all kinds of things. It's an issue right now. This is just going to compound that problem. I feel like the city should be helping resolve these issues, not allow or approve things that could possibly make it worse. So that's one of our main concerns. There was a lot of waivers I noticed on the PowerPoint as well. One that caught my eye, I didn't really get a long glance at it, but lot width waivers, there's just a bunch of waivers. I don't understand why, like how it's approved, and if they're approved, why are they approved? Just the spacing between the houses, that's interesting. But yeah, that caught my attention. What else do I got here? With the alley, I feel like there's an alternative option that might be feasible. Instead of doing a cul-de-sac, design a perimeter road, put the houses in the middle, put those backyards facing each other. If you did a road allowing access to all the homes, that would eliminate that problem. So I don't feel like we need to approve this as is. That would satisfy the concerns on the adjacent houses that live in Pradera. It is a problem, and it's going to make it worse if this is approved as is. No one came to us early on. It sounds like there's been 6 iterations of this. No homeowner input has been requested. So a lot of time could have been saved if we had just been asked for our input early on. So I don't know why that wasn't done. I agree with the pest and dirt concerns. This is obviously being done for profit. That's great. You know, this is going to be done at some point in time. Homeowners should be compensated to some effect of pest control services, window cleaning. I don't know what's considered standard, but something should be considered. We're going to be impacted to some degree. So I hope there's some kind of condition that's applied if this project is allowed to proceed. What else? I don't know if the metrics being discussed are completely accurate on lot sizes in the surrounding areas. All the new development is easily 12,500. Quarter-acre lots are bigger. We're nowhere near 5,000 or 6,000. So I don't know. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but we're not in that size category. Shea, Pradera, KB Homes, these are big lots. We're not in the 6,000 square foot category. Not that it matters, but yeah, 40,000 cubic yards, that's gonna be like 1 truck every 15 minutes for 3 months. So that's a lot of dirt for infill as well. Did the math. 20-yard trucks for a project this size is probably big. It's probably gonna be double that. They're probably gonna use 10 or 16-yard trucks for accessing a space this tight and confined. Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is it Kofi Reed? I apologize if I mispronounced your name.
It's quite all right. I get that quite a bit. It's all right. My name is Kofi Reed, and I'm the president and CEO of San Diego Habitat for Humanity. And I'd like to thank the commissioners and the staff for allowing me some time to present to you all. I just want to talk about 2 things today. The first is to sort of do a little bit of level setting about the development that we are thinking about having the pleasure of participating in, and then also talking a little bit about our experience with the 2 principles of the developer that is creating this project. So just as some background, what we're talking about is the affordable portion of this development. And these are going to be 10 homes that are going to be built, bought, and owned by low to moderate income families. And these are the same families that are aspiring for that portion of the American dream that is home ownership. These homes will be one of 2 developments that we are currently pleased to be in partnership with the city of Escondido around. And this development, as with the other, is really about not just providing that dream, but also making it possible for people to get all of the benefits that come with home ownership that we all know come with home ownership. Some of us have had the privilege of having home ownership be a part of what has built us and made us up. And we're trying to extend that to some families that perhaps don't have that right now. What I can say is that John Kay in particular hasn't only worked with us for over a year on this site, but he's been working with us for 4 additional years on the other development that we're doing here in Escondido. He's been sincerely and earnestly invested in both our work, our model and the people who we're trying to serve. That's not just here in the city of Escondido, that's been up and down the coast of California. John Kay and I had the pleasure of taking a trip up to the Bay Area where we spent our time learning about how can we bring more affordable housing to the communities that we live in. I'm a San Diego native, I'm not from Escondido, but I know that our region desperately needs more affordable housing, and we think that affordable home ownership is one of the best ways of providing it. And so we hope that you as the commissioners will consider all those things, and of course, think about them as you make your recommendations. So with that, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for all you're doing in our region. I want to thank you for what you're doing in our city, and I want to thank you for what you want to do in this proposed project.
I certainly appreciate that. Whenever folks thank me for the work that Habitat does, I always point out two things. The first is it's the staff that does the work, and two, if you can't have fun being the CEO of Habitat for Humanity, there's something wrong with you. I mean, it's a really fun job. So anyway, yeah, please.
Thank you very much for your comments. Mr. Tom Forster?
Thank you. Hello, I'm a resident of Escondido. I live on Conway Drive. I'm not really for or against the new development. My main concern is the traffic impact. I live on the corner of Conway and Vista, and that intersection is already well beyond what it can handle. I watch cars, vehicles just run the stop signs at all the commuting hours, pick up and drop offs for the kids at the middle school. The traffic in that area has just gotten significantly worse, adding 55 new homes, plus 2,000 trucks coming through. I would urge the council, the city, to really look closely at the mitigation strategies for the traffic concerns that are there. Some type of traffic calming, speed bumps along Vista, a light, whatever they happen to be, but it's really gotten bad right at that corner there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. And lastly, for this project, Mr. John Baker.
John Baker, City of Escondido. I want to talk about three things, I guess, that have been brought up, two that have been brought up, and one that hasn't been brought up. First of all, about safety. I have four sons. My third one is going to Rincon right now, so I drive by on a daily basis, dropping him off. I go on Conway. As I drive my son to school, but I watch other kids that are walking up to school. As it is right now, there's very little area for them to walk. It's not safe. Widening these streets and putting in sidewalks is going to greatly increase safety for the kids that are walking to school. So I really disagree with people who said that that it will become less safe. Secondly, is about traffic. There is a lot of traffic there in the morning when you're dropping off your son or daughter. There is a lot of traffic when people are picking up their son or daughter at the end of school. In between, I feel like there's very little traffic, actually, which can sometimes make people drive quicker than they should, but it doesn't mean there are too many vehicle trips being taken. I don't feel like this project is going to greatly increase that, and I think that there's not a ton right now. The third item that hasn't been brought up is my son, my oldest son that went there also is 22 years old. I had a conversation with a good friend of mine just the other day when we were talking about his daughter who's 23. And we're wondering, how are our kids going to move out of our house? I'd love to get my kid out of the house. Some people want to keep their kids. I want my kids to fly the coop. How are they going to do it? They can't afford it. There's not enough housing out there. Whether it's houses, whether it's apartments, whether it's mansions, whether it's small houses. The more housing that's out there, the more people can move out of their parents' house. I want my kid out of my house. We need to make it be affordable for people to live out there. And increasing the amount of houses out there is the best way to do it.
Thank you very much for your comments. That was the last speaker slip I had. Are there any other members of the public who would like to speak to this project one way or another? Or? No? Okay, seeing none. Let's see, where are we? Yikes. Okay, at this point, I'm going to close the public hearing, and we will move to questions and discussion amongst the commissioners.
Okay, so I'm going to include staff in the two questions. One is the issue that's being brought forward to us by the residents that I'm having the most empathy for is traffic. Could staff please present to us in a way that will assure the Planning Commission that those concerns are being addressed and appropriate measures are being taken?
I'd like to ask our Assistant City Engineer, Owen Tunnel, to provide some input on that.
Yeah, I mean, I could take a stab at it. I do know the applicant has their traffic engineer here as well, who studied it in detail. We did review those traffic studies and ultimately agree with their findings. There was a bit of back and forth, and so it's not like we just took a quick look. I would just say off the top, they analyzed both what we would call level of service, which was kind of the old CEQA standard for analyzing traffic. It no longer is, but the city still has general plan standards, and so it was analyzed. And no significant impacts were found, due to number of cars generated by the project on the surrounding streets. The new standard, as we've heard tonight, is VMT, vehicle miles traveled, and that was analyzed, and an impact was found, and they have identified mitigating measures to offset that. And so I don't know if you have specific questions for the traffic engineer, but he is here, and I would think he might be better suited to ask if you had specific questions.
Commissioner Barber, do you want to hear from the applicant's engineer?
Yes,
if that's okay. If you could introduce yourself, sir.
Excuse me. My name is John Borman. I'm with a local traffic engineering firm called Lynn Scott Law in Greenspan. Our company did do a full traffic study for the project. The city has very detailed standards on how those studies are done. We went out there and did traffic counts on the roads out there. We determined how much more traffic the project will generate. We add that traffic onto the street system and analyze the intersections with and without the project traffic. As Mr. Tunnel said, we did find that the roads can't handle the traffic. As someone said, our analysis backed this up. Other than right before and after school, it's not super busy out there with a lot of congestion and things like that. So for the majority of the time, it's not, the levels of service are good. We do computer analysis of the intersections with and without the project. We grade the intersections, and they do work. So that's the bottom line.
Can I ask you a question as well? Can you provide some clarity as to the delta in your analysis between what's there now and what the impact of this results to be?
Yeah, that's a good question. Give me a second. Yeah, so in general, it's less than a second more that you'd wait at an intersection. I think in general terms, we analyzed the Broadway Rincon, the Rincon Ash, the Rincon Conway, the Stanley Ash intersection, and a couple others, and it's generally a second. 1.3 seconds was the biggest increase in delay. That's how much you waited at an intersection with and without the project.
Okay. I believe one resident was concerned about sight distance at the intersection of Vista and Conway. How was that analyzed?
Yeah, the Vista Conway was not in our study area. That was too far away. Not enough project traffic would use that intersection.
Okay.
There's a lot of other ways to get to Broadway and things like that. So
there was one other concern with the assumption of traffic, that may have been under what it actually is. What can you tell us about that?
You might be referring to the number of cars per household, yes. So actually the number of cars per household is not part of our calculus in the traffic world. What we base our analysis on is they've studied subdivisions like this. They put the tubes on the road so they know how many cars come in and out. Regardless of how many car ownership there is, we do count all the cars that come in and out of a subdivision and then divide that by the number of units so we know how many trips per unit is generated. And that's very standard. There's books on that. The city requires us to use a very specific calculus for that, and that's how we did it.
So that's an analysis based on the existing conditions. And I think the question that the public had was your assumptions regarding the impact based on the proposed development. How's that derived?
Yeah, the number of trips per home is what we analyze for each home. It's 10 trips per home, basically. 5 cars come in and out of a house during the day for a total of 10, 5 in, 5 out. And that amount of traffic times the number of homes is how much more traffic it'll generate. So that's, again, there's publications that we are forced to use based on city standards. So it's very standard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
All right, and Commissioner Barber, you wanted Dare to review the state law as regards the density bonus, right?
Yeah, before we get into that, I was going to ask staff and the applicant, given the concerns expressed by Mr. Quest again about the elevation of the pad adjacent to his home and his concerns about, I'm wondering if there's any manner of possible compromise to reduce that elevation.
From a staff perspective, we reviewed the project that was put in front of us, and we reviewed it based on the density bonus waiver request. So it's not in our discretion to make that request, but I would let the applicant speak to that if he desires.
Oh.
Yes, we did look at that possibility, but part of the problem, or the problem is the gravity flow of the sewer main that's running from west to east, and we can't go any lower than where we're at right now.
Could there be any landscape buffering to help block their view of this?
Yeah, we can do trees on either side of the property line for screening. We can also make sure there's not the 5-foot, but a minimum of a 15-foot setback from the property line.
Okay, I would encourage that, and I thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
And just to clarify that conversation, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, would happen as part of the next submission or proposal for the building proposal, correct?
So if the commission so desired, they could recommend conditions of approval that would detail these pieces of information.
So that could be reviewed later.
Okay, thank
you.
So yes, I would like the city attorney to address the points made by the attorney that spoke against the project.
Well, I'm not sure I recall all the points, but I do, sorry, I don't think I have my mic on. I believe one of the issues was whether an EIR needs to be prepared.
Mm-hmm.
That's the main issue I have down as notes. And just to give you all the standard is if the lead agency finds there's a substantial evidence that the project will have a significant effect on the environment that cannot be mitigated, then the agency must prepare an EIR. So that's the standard you're looking at.
Did the attorney that was addressing these issues provide any significant evidence that would make us reevaluate having used a negative declaration?
I believe that's really up to you to discuss. I can give you the legal determination.
Yes.
The legal standard, but it's up to you to determine whether there's
give me the legal standard.
Well, no, I mean, what I mean is I just did the substantial evidence that the project will have a significant effect on the environment that can't be mitigated. So what the MND has done is put forth mitigation measures that the consultants and the city have determined would mitigate those effects so that they're not significant.
I did read the negative declaration, and I saw those points being addressed. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Paul?
Yeah, I just want to make a point of clarification. When you asked about the setback for lot number 10, I believe the chair said that would be at the next meeting, but I believe that's incorrect, right? This diagram has only a 5-foot setback. You would have to be a condition tonight to make that different than the 5 feet that's in the plan. Is that correct?
So the condition would be, obviously, at this point, we're making recommendations to city council, but it would be something that we would want to address at this point. Now, the waiver had been requested for setback reductions. If there's something that can be done, and if the applicant decides that they're able, or determines that they're able to provide that greater setback, great. And he seemed to indicate that he could potentially be looking at the ability to do that. But that said, they had requested that setback reduction as a waiver, so it doesn't necessarily apply to all lots. It potentially could be more doable here. I think that the fact that you've got the slope already, that sets you a certain distance away from the property line to start with, and then there's a setback potentially from the top of that slope is what that additional number would be. And we'd have to talk to the applicant to see if they would be willing to do that, because the waiver had been requested.
Chair, could I make my comments on my impressions on the project now?
Let's
Okay.
see if there are any other questions or concerns, discussion items.
Just if you had a chance to see about the Fish and Game recommendation for mitigation.
I think I had said I was going to defer to the applicant, or I'm sorry, to the environmental consultant on that, because I don't have that in front of me.
Great.
Yes. Good evening, Commissioners. Peter Carlson, the environmental consultant. Great question on the Fish and Game, and I'm going to try to make this not alphabet soup in terms of the answer. So, there's a number of regional habitat conservation planning efforts that have been taking place within San Diego County. They're kind of under a, we'll call it an umbrella of habitat conservation. There's a North County plan. There's a South County plan, there's an East County plan. South County plan is the one that's been adopted. The North County plan is still in draft form. However, there was a new draft that came out in 2020. This is a planning effort that includes both U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and other agencies. In that North County plan for oak trees and coast live oak woodland habitat, there's a mitigation ratio requirement of a 1-to-1 replacement. The city's requirement is 2-to-1. Fish and Game in their, Fish and Wildlife Service, CDFW, in their letter requested a 10-to-1 ratio. That's a typical request of CDFW. We don't see anything that's unique on this property in terms of the coast live oak woodland habitat that would require a higher mitigation ratio than the North County plan and actually really the city's plan. So with the city's plan being at a 2-to-1 ratio, we felt based on the habitat that's on site, given the setting of the habitat and given the quality of the habitat, the 2-to-1 provides sufficient mitigation. And again, that mitigation is higher than the 1-to-1 ratio of the North County. Do you want to ask her? I was going to.
No, I was just going to say I'm familiar with
Sure.
those concepts, but the North County plan is just a draft document.
That is correct. It's advisory.
And it's been a draft document for a few decades.
A long time, yes.
Right. And Fish and Game is going to be okay now with us just ignoring their recommendation?
So it was a recommendation by Fish and Wildlife. And again, in our assessment of the site and the physical conditions, and given the guidance, and even though the North County plan is still draft, it is used as advisory, it is followed. Fish and Wildlife refers to it as well and says, hey, follow the plan. So while it's not officially adopted, it is used for guidance. And so, and I wanted to tear off that response into one of your prior questions, which was, why do we have a mitigation measure that talks about not duplicating oak tree mitigation? So I think as Mr. Mattson said, there's individual trees that are both oak trees as well as non-native ornamental trees that require replacement. There's also oak woodland habitat that's been identified on the site. So this is a habitat, not just individual trees, but it's the compilation of the trees in a grouping setting with understory. And as we mapped the habitat out on site, we determined that to be an oak woodland habitat. There's a mitigation measure that requires replacement of oak woodland habitat through the purchase of credits at the Daly Ranch Mitigation Bank. What we have said is that while we're looking at replacement of habitat at Daly Ranch, there's also the replacement of individual trees within the purchase of that acreage of habitat. And that should count as replacement of individual trees as well. So there's not a double counting and a double requirement of trees in terms of that mitigation. So there are two mitigation measures. One is a habitat by acreage. The other is individual trees.
Right, but there's nothing precluding us from asking for both. Right. Same as Fish and Game asking for 10 times.
You have that.
Thank you.
Jurisdiction, absolutely.
Thank you. Anything? Any other thoughts, questions? Okay, Commissioner Spear.
I'm referring back. Could you pull up the section again that shows the grading? I can't remember which of the three it is, but I do have a question relating to just the thought process on this. That one, yes. So as we look at, section A, showing the dotted line or dashed line there, that's the existing grade, and the shaded portion there as well, and then section B as well. We're talking about a fairly substantial. This is not balanced cut and fill, but there's a substantial difference and bringing on site quite a volume of soil. What in section B? I mean, we go from basically a hill to a valley to put these homes. They're at a very low pad heights for these four here. What is the rationale here for having to need to import so much soil and not raising the elevation of the total finished grade? Why are we cutting in so much? What was the thought process in terms of costs and all of that? What's driving that, I guess, is my question.
Is the applicant's civil engineer available? I will also, while he's on his way up, I will say that these sections are across certain portions of the site, right? So it's a line across here and not the whole way through, but just FYI, I'd make sure we're aware of that.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Ryan Waffle. I'm with PLSA, we're the civil engineer. As Adam mentioned, the site sections are cut and they're somewhat skewed, and they also have a vertical exaggeration scale to them, so they appear much more misaligned than they actually are. But what we do is when we come in and design projects, our number one goal is to balance sites, right? So we have a site, which is Street F, where we were trying to generate as much cut as we could to flip it over to the Street H side, which is the north side of Stanley. So that's why the larger cuts are happening at the end of the cul-de-sac on the subdivision that is taking access off of Lanner and flipping it to the side across the street. We also have to take into consideration minimum drainage, sewer slopes. We have to treat and detain the water. So there's a lot of components that go into the design of where we get to where we get. What we do is we follow the design guidelines with the city, work with city staff, to make sure that we're in conformance with those design requirements as a whole, not just as a grading perspective.
Was part of this driver the visual appearance at a higher level, or was that not a consideration?
The visual appearance from,
in other words,
public or from
the profile of the finished construction and requirements that kick in from that. Is that part of what's driving this, or is it all of the other things that you're mentioning?
It's mainly earthwork balancing, conforming to city standards and guidelines for everything that I laid out: drainage, water, sewer, soil, water quality, and detention. So we, as a civil engineer, we don't analyze visual impacts per se. I mean, we try to conform to what the city has outlined in their guidance for visual impacts to the public, but as far as our design goes, we have so many other boxes that we have to check.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Oh, Mr. Tunnell, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I would just to speak to that a little bit. The more northern portion of this project, streets H and G, and sewering that, I think as we heard from the developer, at the minimum grades is kind of driving those pad grades on that northerly part, and in turn the fill heights there. So and as we just heard, to try to balance and minimize the amount of import, the more southerly street F it has been cut down, maybe more than you would have ordered, maybe needed to do. So.
Thank you. Any other? Yes?
No, I'm.
Oh, you're good?
Just ready to make comments.
Okay, yeah. Now I think we're at a point now. Commissioners want to make comments about the project.
Yeah. I just thought, I wanted to say that I get it. I get it that it would be preferred and ideally if we could still maintain RE20 in that site and keep it semi-rural. No one may get it more than I did because although I've returned to the Planning Commission this year, 20 years ago, I was also on the Planning Commission. Nobody fought harder than I did to keep all the agricultural lands and rural lands north of Vista Avenue semi-rural. In fact, I have friends now who live in the homes that have since been built, and I would joke with them, I voted against this home that you live in. And I get it that even though many of you have expressed that you understand it's going to be developed and probably not RE20, that this density is still higher than desirable. But circumstances have changed. The community, that part of the Escondido community is no longer semi-rural, it's been urbanized. This parcel, this land is an island of semi-rural surrounded by urbanization. Goals have changed. It's a goal of the city of Escondido to encourage and find more affordable housing. It's a goal of the state for the cities to find more affordable housing. In fact, it's not just a goal, it's a mandate. It's a mandate that we're required to follow. I think it's, a lot of what I've heard of how they would like to see this project density develop is ideal, but it's not practical. And I think in pursuing more affordability in our housing in Escondido, I think really this is the future of growth in Escondido. First of all, I think lot assemblage is going to be a huge part of our future. I think if we all determine that supply and demand of housing is a major impact on housing prices, that we need to pursue and seek out future growth, but development that responds to the growth management tools that we've developed over the years. And we need to respect and understand that the city is required to pursue density bonuses as a means, as a tool of creating affordable housing. So with expanding affordable housing, making housing prices more stable, number one, I'm satisfied that this project has met CEQA, state, and local policy guidelines. I'm satisfied that we have met our obligations under the state law that I've just been referring to. I'm satisfied with this project. I think these are the kind of projects we need in Escondido to meet our future affordable housing needs.
Thank you, Commissioner Barber. Any other comments?
No, I appreciate my colleagues' comments, and and agree with many of them, if not all of them. I would just like to give my perspective as well. I'm in agreement that we are under mandate to create housing in Escondido. I do appreciate the participation, those of you that have come tonight and expressed your concerns. That's very important. And we have the balancing act of trying to make sure we're following our mandates and our laws and considering the public and the benefit of Escondido as well. And I think it's helpful to, from our standpoint, to consider all of these things and to make certain that these things are being considered by staff and all of the recommendations that have been made. As I understand our scope, it is to ensure that really that the safety, that there are no safety concerns in relation to this development project. And we have to, I can empathize entirely with many of the comments. I was taking a tally of the comments. We had an overwhelming number of people today were not in favor of this project for a myriad of reasons, but many of them very similar. Many of them I think we probably all share as well. We would like development within the city of Escondido to be ideal, but there is a balancing act. So many of your concerns are shared. They can't all be accommodated with the balancing act that we have and the mandates that we have. My biggest question was, does what is proposed create any safety concerns that would be actually a means for us to consider non-approval of this project? Have to rely on staff. The answer I have is that safety concerns have been looked at. My concerns primarily are with the large amount of grading that is being performed on this project. I don't like the large amount of grading. In my professional world, I deal with failures, with structural failures and with site failures. And I can tell you, I investigate and determine cause of failures all over the west of the United States, all over San Diego County, and I've seen slope stability failures in Oceanside, in Carlsbad, in Del Mar, all over. I see them every day, and they all have certain things in common. They're all projects that are approved. They're all projects that go through all of the hoops that we're going through, and yet we have failures. So my biggest concern is, what do we have here? Are we setting ourselves up for a safety concern that would be the prerogative of this committee to provide negative recommendations for approval? But we have to rely on the professionals that have provided analysis on this project, and from staff's indications, we have done that. We have professionals that have looked at the safety concerns of this project in relation to the grading, and we have recommendations that mitigate the concerns. And so there are, in my view, I have nothing that I can look at that says we have remaining safety concerns that would be grounds for considering a negative recommendation on this project.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Paul?
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. So I have a couple of concerns with this project, and I'm going to go in like no particular order, just as I remember them. But I'd like to thank Habitat for Humanity for coming out, and this planning commission reviewed the project on El Norte, and I don't remember the exact vote, but I did not vote in favor of that project. I had some concerns with that project on El Norte. Those concerns were not addressed, and it looks like this project is going to build a duplicate of that. And so all the concern, I'd encourage you to go back and look at the video or the tape for that meeting, because all of my concerns that I had back then I will still apply to this project. I'm concerned with a concept that we try to say doesn't exist anymore, the separate but equal concept, and I think what we're doing here is we're spot zoning multifamily multifamily in a single-family neighborhood, and that we think we're providing necessary low-income housing when we're removing 11, 12, 13 low-income units, and we're retaining the 2 nicest units, but the 10 low-income units we're providing, the people that are going to be dislocated, they can't afford those. These are really low-income people that are being dislocated to build 10 low incomes for what we call I'm calling 80% low income, and the people. I mean, that just doesn't seem. That seems hypocritical to me. So I don't see any net benefit for our arena numbers providing low income housing. Yes, we're providing more housing because there's more units, period. But if we really wanted to provide low income housing, we would do the whole thing in duplexes and we'd build 100 units there. And we'd say, we have to do that. We have to, because state law says we have to do that. So we have to do that. And I just think that's BS. And I've mentioned in my other questions some of my other concerns, but those are my biggest concerns. Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot of your comments have already touched on what I would say. I do want to circle back to that issue of the setback for the home on Weiss Street being 15 feet. And I would like that to have to be included if this does get approved, to be looked at again, especially with the landscape, what they're going to be looking at with that large elevation height, to make sure that that is something that can be done for that home. That's it.
Okay, thank you. So in my case, I would agree largely with what Commissioner Barber has discussed. I recognize some of the challenges that Commissioner Paul has articulated as well. On balance, though, I must say I think we really are, as Commissioner Barber spoke in some depth about the need to balance our housing needs and be able to address these needs as we go forward. I know that this is going to be a massive project, particularly with the construction issues. I'm concerned about that with respect to dust and all of the moving of earth. And the setback issue, I completely agree with Commissioner Maccaro that would be a necessary condition for our recommendation to council. And that's what I'm going to say about that right now. So I think, oh, sorry, do you have more to say? Go ahead. Yeah? Okay, so would somebody like to place a motion on that?
I will make a motion to adopt Resolution 202215, recommending approval of the project with that stipulation that you clarified.
So we would need to articulate that well. So that would be the fifth, we would articulate that there be a 15-foot setback.
This was your suggestion, so how would you like to?
Yeah, how would you like to word that?
Yes, that 15-foot setback with proper landscape to be included in that.
With landscaping to serve as a buffer.
Yes.
Okay, motion to adopt Resolution 202215 with the stipulation that there'd be a 15-foot setback with proper landscaping buffering. Is that?
Yep.
Is that satisfactory?
Yeah, just to be clear, that would be a condition to
Yes.
the project approval.
That's a condition for the council.
So that is my motion.
I second the motion. Should we do a roll call?
Chair Barbe,
Yes, with that caveat.
Commissioner Barber,
Yes.
Commissioner Maccaro,
Yes.
Vice Chair Paul,
No.
Commissioner Spear.
Yes.
The vote is 5-1 to approve. Excuse me, 4-1.
4 to 1, yes.
Sorry.
All right, thank you very much. Does the commission need a quick recess? Yes, let's take a 5-minute recess, and then we'll reconvene. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and get started then. This is for the second public hearing. It's PHG 20-0032, PL 20-0738, PL 20-0739, PL 21-0126, PL 21-0127, and PL 21-0128. Referencing annexation, general plan amendment, pre-zone, tentative subdivision map, and a master and precise development plan.
Yes.
And first, are there any disclosures from staff from the commissioners regarding this item?
Oh, yes, I did meet with 2 of the residents. Mercedes and I went out with carrots and we fed them.
All right. Are there any other disclosures?
Names are occupants.
All right. Staff presentation, Jay?
Yes, good evening, Planning Commission. It's good to be back. Tonight's item, Jay Paul, Senior Planner. Tonight's item has several discretionary actions and or components. It includes annexation to the city of Escondido and pre-zone to establish a zoning designation when it does, or if and when it does annex into the city. That would be the zoning designation that would be the city's zoning designation. Also includes a general plan amendment, tentative subdivision map, and a master and precise development plan for a proposed 102-unit ownership condominium project, along with certification of a final environmental impact report that was prepared for the project. Now, the components of this project, Planning Commission would be reviewing this and making a recommendation ultimately to City Council. One of the components will move on past that, which would be the annexation or reorganization. That would have to go to the Local Agency Formation Commission, LAFCO, for final determination, not on the project, but on the annexation reorganization to the city of Escondido. Brief overview of the project. It involves approximately 7.7 acres here, 6.9 net acres we take out for the streets. Dedications for the project. It's located in this small county island, and it includes these 5 parcels here. The county zoning is VR residential, village residential, which allows up to ultimately 24 dwelling units per acre, if you could get sewer to develop to that density. The city does have city sewer available. That's why the applicants are pursuing development within the city of Escondido. They have the utilities and infrastructure necessary to support development on the project site. The map here on the left shows the surrounding general plan land use designations, urban 1 to the north, suburban on the property, and to the south. However, the mix of development includes, if you can see on the aerial overhead, you have a planned development with a mix of densities and development types. You have duplex developments on single-family lots, individual lots to the north, along with condominium development further to the north. To the south, traditional single-family residential development. To the west is the county on larger, more estate or rural type lots. And to the east across Iris, there is a independent living / multifamily residential care facility located there. The request includes annexation of the 7.7 acres project site, a general plan amendment to change the existing suburban land use designation, which is single-family residential, allows up to 3.3 dwelling units per acre, to a medium density residential urban 3, which allow a maximum density of up to 18 dwelling units per acre. Some background on annexation and general plan amendments. To submit an application to move forward, it requires previous council authorization. And they don't make a decision on the project. They look at the bigger picture and whether it's appropriate to submit a project, and it's not premature, especially for the annexation. Do we have services out there? And should the applicant submit an application, and that would allow city to submit that. City Council reviewed the initial request back in June of 2020. The applicant had requested a proposed general plan amendment of Urban 2, which will allow up to 12 dwelling units per acre. Later on, they came back in November and requested a modification to that to propose general plan amendment to Urban 3 to increase the density up to 18 dwelling units per acre. Council authorized both of those submittals, and therefore the applicant came back and submitted a full application to the city. You can see here, this is just the existing condition. At the top is looking at the intersection of North Iris and Robin Hill. You can see the existing built condition of that. That's looking west and south. And at the bottom is the looking north and west along North Iris Lane, and the two residences are located further back in the picture there. That was referenced by Commissioner Paul. The project includes 7.7 acres, 6.9 net acres. We include 101 condominium units with a density of approximately 14.6 dwelling units per acre. The project includes 21 separate buildings, and there are several building types. They include buildings that contain 4, 5, and 6 units each. The project includes mainly two-story buildings with some 3-story elements to them. The units include 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units, and there's 6 different unit types with square footage ranging from approximately 1,200 square feet to 1,900 square feet. The project also includes approximately 97,000 square feet of a variety of open space, passive, active, and landscaped areas. Briefly, the grading plan includes a combination of cut and fill. The project, mainly the primary cut is in this the northwest portion of the site, and a retaining wall in this area. They will be lowering the site in that area, and filling the center, the west, and the southern areas of the site. So it'll include a combination cut and fill and retaining walls. These retaining walls range from about 6 feet in height down to 2 feet in height along this perimeter. These, for cut slopes here, these range from 2 to 3 feet to the tallest about 12 feet, which will be viewed interior but not exterior to the project. Access will be provided by the main access here off of Robin Hill Lane. The project will be gated, a gated community, so primary access will come here at Robin Hill Lane through this area here where there will be gates. A secondary access will be provided here on Iris Lane. Will not provide for access in to the project, but secondary access out only, and for secondary emergency access to the project. Some perspectives of the project here to give you kind of the look at the mass and scale, the architectural design, and the streetscape along North Iris Lane. This is looking at the project from the exit out only gate here on North Iris. You can see the variation in the architecture, the roof lines, and the 2- and 3-story elements. The structures are mainly 2 stories, but they do have 3-story elements. Those have been primarily located to the center of the buildings to reduce the overall mass and scale. The unit designs include 2-story units, but some of them do include 3-story, hence these, which will have a 3-story element, that 3rd-story element to them. About 30% of the units include that 3rd-story element to the project. This is a sample example of the architecture. There are several unit types. This is a representative sample of them, the architecture that would be used throughout the project. Through the 21 buildings, there are 4, 5, and 6 unit plans of 2- and 3-story elements. You can see in the bottom corner also the various color schemes that will be used throughout the buildings. This is a representative floor plan. This is of the 4-plex conventional unit types. It includes the 2-story units here, and you can see the center where the 3rd-story or 3-story element units would be located. Each unit also includes a individual 2-car garage. There are also approximately 27 open guest parking spaces located throughout the project. For open space and landscaping, the project includes approximately 97,000 square feet of open space that meets the city's criteria. The minimum required would be 90, and they exceed that amount. I believe 94,000. Would they exceed that amount? You can see here they have located some of the more active recreational nodes throughout the project. They also incorporated the detention basin at the corner. One of the elements that we worked with the applicant, that we didn't want that stormwater feature just to be a grass line hole in the ground. We wanted it to look like a upgraded amenity for the project, because that's the main entry to the project, and they have designed that with some walking paths, some seating areas, trees in that area. So it's a visual amenity for the project rather than just a detention basin, a retention basin for the project. This exhibit here shows the fencing plan and the wall plans for the project. They will be incorporating a combination of decorative masonry block along the iris frontage and around the corner. That will transition to a more open feel with the more decorative tubular steel fencing. And the perimeters where they abut up to single family, you will have the wooden / vinyl fencing to be more residential in nature in those areas. For an environmental review, the applicant prepared a environmental impact report for a full environmental impact report for this project. The first step in that was a notice of preparation and included a public scoping meeting for the project. We took comments from the public and from agencies. With that, the consultant used that to prepare the final technical studies and the draft environmental impact report for the project. That was sent out for 45-day public review between September 20th and November 3rd. During that period, staff received 35 comments, public comments. One of the comments includes 11 form letters in that. So we received a total of 36. One was from the County of San Diego. CEQA requires for environmental impact reports that all public comments have formal responses and included in the final impact report, so you can see what those comments were and the responses to each and every one of those comments. Staff also published all the draft and the final and the comments on the city's website, so the public can review those during the different stages of the public review. Mitigation measures were identified for potential impacts, significant impacts to the environment, to reduce those to less than a significant level. Those included biology, tribal cultural resources, geology, hazardous materials, noise, and traffic. Staff did work with several of the Native American tribes to develop those mitigation measures that would satisfy their concerns regarding inadvertent discoveries on the site during grading operations. The final impact report was prepared. It includes the any modifications and errata section to address any comments or technical issues with the document. It includes the comments and responses, mitigation measures, and CEQA findings are also included with the project. All environmental docs, just like I indicated before, were posted on the city's website for public review. Staff is recommending that the city, or recommend City Council certify the final EAR and approve the annexation, pre-zone, general plan amendment, tentative subdivision map, and master and precise development plan, and that the Planning Commission make that recommendation to the City Council. That concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. So questions for clarification from commissioners to city staff, if any? Commissioner Barber.
I'm just curious, is this another lot assemblage?
It includes 5, let me go up to the very first slide here. So it includes, yes it is. There are 5 separate parcels here that have been assembled for this project.
Okay, so as I said, this is the future.
Yeah. Other comments, questions to staff?
Is this the only project like this that's come before us that meets the open space requirements?
It is one that exceeds it by several thousand square feet.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Spear.
My question is related to the sewer impact. I assume that in looking at the availability of sewer services for this, that we know any negative impact on the sewer capacity or costs to the city?
The Utilities Department did review that and the sewer analysis for the project and indicated that the city has capacity, sufficient capacity to support this project.
Commissioner Maccaro, any comments or questions? No. No questions for clarification? Commissioner Barber? Okay. Thank you very much. Does the applicant have comments or presentation?
Is this on?
Yes.
Okay.
If you could introduce yourself.
Yes, I will. Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Mariana McGrain. I'm the applicant with Hallmark Communities. I don't have a presentation. Jay did quite a thorough, detailed job with that. Just want to take a quick history of who we are and what we do. We've been building homes in San Diego area since 1984, and we're a third-generation home builder. We have entitled and built over 30 projects in the Escondido area and have deep ties to the Escondido community. Our CEO's mom is a former teacher at LR Green and was for many years before she retired. We're currently building multiple projects in various jurisdictions throughout San Diego County, and we're super excited to bring this project before you tonight. We worked very thoughtfully on the design elements of the project and put a lot of attention to detail with the architecture, the product types, and the site design, as was shown through the slides with Jay's presentation. I think the only thing I'll add with regard to the design of the actual units themselves, we put a lot of attention to private open space as well. And so a lot of our units will live like single family homes. That's really important for us to have in a multifamily development, that units live like single family. So we have what we call our conventional product, which is half of the buildings are the conventional product, where you have your entry through the front as well as your garage, like a traditional home, and then the other units are more of an alley-loaded project. So I just wanted to point out the private space aspect of that. With regard to my team, I did bring, if there's any technical questions we want to dive into with regard to traffic, I do have our traffic engineering team as well as greenhouse gas and our quality consultant to help aid those questions. And as far as approval or denial of the project, we are looking for a vote today to take this on to City Council, hopefully next month. And I'll just reserve my time for any comments, questions that may come up throughout the hearing.
Any questions, comments for the applicant? Commissioner Spear?
Maybe this is nitty-gritty, but I'm looking at this. By the way, I appreciate your efforts, and this is great. One question I have, in terms of the 3 and 4 bedroom units, I'm looking at this site and thinking, these are 2-car garages in each unit, which is great. The 4 bedroom units, for example, where would I see some additional parking in here, but when that additional park, how is it looked at in terms of if you have 3 or 4 cars in those 4 bedroom units, where would those go?
There is parking along North Iris Lane. It hasn't been decided yet. It will be in final engineering if North Iris Lane on our project frontage will have parking, but there is additional parking along North Iris to the north and south of the project, in addition to having 27 guest spaces and the 2 car spaces per unit.
That North Iris additional parking is on the lot or not on the lot? It would be
the 27 parking spots?
No, the additional that you were talking about contemplating.
I don't understand your question.
You have the on-site parking spots, I think the 27, but you mentioned there is an addition to that North Iris parking.
That's public parking on North Iris.
Okay. Gotcha.
On either side of the project.
On each side, okay.
I believe the east side is no parking, and Jay can speak more to that. The east side is no parking of North Iris, and the west side does have parking, public parking.
Thank you.
Do you want to add to that, Jay?
Just to clarify, North Iris previously was designated as a collector road. So if you look at the photos of it north and south of the project, it's actually wider than the current designation. So parking is allowed on the west side of the street, north and south, but because of the configuration in the center line, it is not allowed on the eastern side along the residential care facility. Along this frontage, the general plan circulation element designation was changed to local collector, which would still potentially allow for on-street parking along this frontage. However, that won't be decided until the final engineering design, because engineering and the traffic will have to take account when they start doing that, any striping for sight distance at the driveway and at Robin Hill Lane. Based on those sight distances, there may be some area left for on-street parking, which would be overflow parking for the project. I'd like to note that the parking does meet the code requirement for 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units for the project.
And traffic congestion, which has been noted by a number of letters from local folks, that has been addressed as well. There's been a traffic study, I assume.
Correct. There was a traffic analysis
Yeah.
For the project that was included in the environmental impact
Right.
report, but there was mitigation measures for
that as
to
well.
address VMT items.
Any other questions for clarification, comments?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, I'll open it up to the public for comments. Again, please remember you have approximately 3 minutes to offer your thoughts. Mr. James Obergfell. And again, apologies if I pronounce names incorrectly.
My name is James Obergfell. I live on Cheyenne Lane. Earl was here earlier. I'm going to express some of his concerns as well since he had to leave. First one, at the very south end of this proposed property, there is a Vallecitos water line that goes right along there. We have an easement for all the houses on Cheyenne Lane. It even cuts through some of our properties. So I just wanted to express some concern there with just simply putting a retaining wall. The other concerns, they brought up parking on North Irish Lane. There's no parking except for south of Cheyenne Lane and then north of whatever street is after Robin Hill. So there's no parking in front of where this place is currently. There's also no sidewalk, so that is one thing on my end that hopefully, ideally, they're going to put a sidewalk there. The only place to walk right now on North Irish Lane is on the opposite side of the street. The other concern I have is that right now, I don't know if the traffic study covered this, but North Irish Lane is used as a gateway to get from Center City all the way to Broadway or to Country Club. So it's used as a thoroughfare to get from all the major streets and cut through traffic that way. So hopefully when they did their study, this is something that was noted. We see it a lot, taking the kids to school, leaving. We often are backed up because there's only one stoplight into this whole community here. All the other avenues have stoplights onto major thoroughfares, which again are Country Club and Broadway. So there's only stop signs to get on those. So it backs up very frequently if you have someone who wants to make a left turn onto the major thoroughways. So unfortunately, I didn't read the environmental study, but I hope, some other measures could be put in for traffic on that end. And then the last concern I have, hopefully was addressed as well. We have a major problem in that area, and I'm sure others can tell you this, with gophers, rabbits, all kinds of wildlife. So by cutting out 7.7 acres of mostly dirt right now, that's going to push all these problems onto all of us. We already see it. Anyone here who drives by there can note half of the front yards are torn up from this. So just wanted to express those concerns, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Will Mellon, or Miller, sorry. Miller. Another one?
Good evening. Can you guys hear me? Is it on? My name is Will Miller. I'm a resident of 2150 North Iris Lane. Forgive me if I don't follow the proper procedure. I haven't been to a city council meeting since I was in high school, so it's my first one. I've been a resident of Escondido since 2019. I purchased my house in February of 2020, and I'd like to reiterate and echo what my fellow neighbor over here had mentioned about traffic concerns. I see every day that people speed down our street going far past the 35 mile per hour speed limit. And in addition to that, ever since I moved into the house in February 2020, I've seen at least 3 car accidents due to speeding concerns, both on Country Club and on Center City Parkway. On top of that, my wife owns an in-home daycare, so when the parents drop off and pick up their children at my house, the parents and myself and my wife have to take extra care to watch the kids to make sure they're not running out, because they're 2-year-olds, they're going to do what they're going to do. And having people speed down our street, especially with the addition of another 200 cars going in and out and about doing their business, presents a very serious hazard, in my opinion. In addition to that, all of those new homes are going to be traveling to the North Broadway Elementary School, which I think just compounds the fact that these people are speeding down the street day in and day out. So that's my main concern. But again, I'd like to echo all my other neighbors' concerns, because I'm sure they're all valid as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jason Greminger?
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. My name is Jason Greminger. Usually when I'm standing at these diocese, I'm presenting for an applicant. Tonight I'm here as a resident. I want to say that I am supportive of this project. I think they've done an excellent job designing this project. And full disclosure, I did work for the applicant on a limited basis. What I do appreciate about these types of projects is that they're kind of the missing middle. They're bringing a unit type that is accessible to working people, and I think we need a lot more of that type of product in this city. I think it brings a vibrant community together, and it attracts a certain level of people that I think we want to see in the city and see the city grow. So I'll keep it short and say that I support this project, and I hope you guys take consideration and pass this along to the City Council. Thank you.
Excuse me, are you a resident of the neighborhood?
Not of this neighborhood, but I do live on Chestnut Street in Escondido.
Right, thank you. I used to live on Chestnut also.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jim Simmons? Or Simons, sorry. Simmons.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, my name is Jim Simmons. I've lived in North County for 56 years. I've been in Escondido for 27 of those, and I currently live here. And I own a land use firm, and we've represented this company on several occasions, and I can tell you they're a quality builder. They know what they're doing. They put together a very, very good product. And workforce housing is an extremely important issue, not just for the city of Escondido, but for the whole San Diego region. And this brings a product type that allows firefighters and policemen and teachers to get a home and to be part of this process as we grow. And this company does a very, very good job. I'm not representing them professionally tonight, but I am representing them as a friend and as a resident. And I think this is a worthwhile project. If it doesn't come into the city, the density in the county is significantly higher. They're going to be about 14.5 to the acre. So they bring you a product that gives you a real step up in terms of providing housing to your workforce, and I hope you'll approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Audrey Bronwell? Brower, sorry.
Hi, I'm
Welcome.
Audrey Brower. My husband and I have lived on the corner of, southwest corner of Iris and Cheyenne for over 30 years. We raised our 4 children there, all of whom are gainfully employed and have moved out. And we have enjoyed living in this neighborhood. It's become a very good family-oriented neighborhood. But the traffic, ever since the development east of us has happened, the traffic is horrible. Iris is not meant to be a thoroughfare, but people are cutting through it, and the traffic to line up, sometimes I have to wait, several traffic light signals just to get to Center City, to go to work in the morning. Trying to walk my dog across the street or walk my grandson across the street to get to the sidewalk is very dangerous because of the grade of Iris. You can't get a good, clear sight of the traffic coming, and a lot of times because of the speed, cars fly through there, not looking at the 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. I'm not opposed to development. I'm in the construction industry. But this quantity of housing is just not appropriate for this neighborhood. We already lost our fire station on Village by the 7-Eleven there and Country Club, so we don't have a close-by fire station now. We rarely have police presence in our neighborhoods, so I'm concerned about what public safety we're going to have, and not to mention the noise. We can't even sit in our backyard and read a book or have a telephone conversation. And mostly, I'm very concerned about the safety of the residents of Meadowbrook Village. I can see them when I'm trying to get out of my street, residents there who are 20, 30 years older than I am, trying to exit that property. And you have to dodge in front of cars, or sometimes when you finally get out of that driveway, the cars are driving so fast on Iris that they're right away on top of that car. So it's very dangerous for these senior citizens in that community to be getting onto Iris. When the traffic study, I would be interested to know when that traffic study happened, because when we first had our Zoom meeting with Mr. Paul, it was during COVID, and so there was not as much traffic at that time. I know that they did statistical studies, but stats can be proved one way or another. I want reality. And so I would encourage you to actually go to the site, try to cross that street, not at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, when you would get home from work, and walk your dog and have it be a part of your neighborhood. So I appreciate all the work. This has been a very educational thing. And I'd also, in light of what the first group that spoke, if that development goes through, that's going to add that many more vehicles to our street. They're going to do the same traffic pattern that everybody else is doing. They're going to go drive right down to Iris and bypass. We need to make Country Club, the road that it's set up for, to be more of a main thoroughfare than using our little 2-lane street. And then in looking at the environmental impact report, it talked about where the money was going to go to, the developer fees. The area by the Rincon Water District needs work. It floods whenever it rains. We just had a lot of flooding. The traffic leaving Rincon Water, I see their employees, we have to let them in, be a good neighbor and let them in because of the traffic. So I think it's unfortunate that when a development comes in like this, that the local neighborhood does not benefit from those developer fees. They're going to other parts of the city. I know we all have to share. We're one big happy family here, and it's the city of Escondido. But those developer fees should also help benefit our local community where we are having to make sacrifices by developers and additional people coming in. So thank you very much.
Thank you for speaking. Mr. Jack Wood. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Jack Wood. I live at 2082 Garden Valley Glen, which is a project right across the street from this particular project. By way of transparency, I'd like to let you know that I certainly appreciate all the work that you do. I served 20-plus years as a elected member of the Fallbrook Planning Group and retired a year ago as chairman of that group. So I'm familiar with this type of project. It's an infill project, but it tells me that because you're going through a general plan amendment and you're going to do a rezone, the original intent of this property was for single-family homes, not condominiums, and the kind of density that you're proposing. When you look at the county numbers for trips per dwelling unit, you're looking at about 1,200 trips out of that project with 102 units. I'm not against the development. If it were to be developed as single-family homes, which it was originally zoned to do, I'd have no problem with it whatsoever. But to put 102 homes or dwellings on 7.7 acres is not realistic. It's a wrong project for the wrong place. You have as the one person who mentioned earlier, Iris is a cutoff street from between Broadway over to Center City Parkway and over to El Norte. I've only lived here a year, but I've already found out that that's the shortcut. So when you put another 1,200 people on that road and they go pretty fast, coming out of a retirement community as I do, it's very difficult to get out on that road. So I think that this project would be fine in another place, but it's the wrong project for this property. And if I were in your position, I would decline it for the reasons I've stated. One of the things that I learned early on in my tenure is that the NIMBY, the not in my backyard, never buys any vote for me. But if there are concrete reasons why this should not be done, then those should be considered for this project. And I think that the items that I've given you are more than sufficient for this project to be rejected. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Mr. Brent Marin Teffy?
I actually took him home.
So sorry.
I wonder if I could speak in his behalf.
Sure, if you don't mind subsequently just redoing the speaker sheet for us, that would be great. A little bit of bureaucracy. Okay.
No.
Sorry? No, please, come now.
No, I'm retired, so he had to go to work tomorrow, so he wanted to ride home. My name is Alan Schertzer, and I live at 414 Robin Hill Lane, and that is at the top of Robin Hill as you would come in. I live at the very top, and I have two homes next to me on either side that are city properties. I'm wedged between them, and there's a sewer line that comes down that street, goes all the way to the top, and I chose not to join the city. My septic tank just got rebuilt, and I'm very happy with it. But my concern is the traffic on Robin Hill. It is very narrow. I don't know if there's any proposed sidewalks that is going to go in up the hill. And as it stands right now, I believe Robin Hill is a undocumented road. It's a private street, if I'm not mistaken. And I wanted to know who's going to take care of the maintenance of Robin Hill up to the sewer line, because we have 6 trash trucks each week. I have Edco, and then the city has theirs, and they back up to the top of the hill, which is a dead end, and you can't really turn around. And it's degraded the asphalt. It's a mess. Although, I repaved my driveway. I have an easement out to Robin Hill. And I was just concerned on the traffic and the exit coming out of this development. People drive pretty fast down in the dirt road area of Robin Hill. I live on the top, and I'm retired, so I can stay at home and watch what goes on now. And very aware of how much traffic there is in the morning. Along with the wildlife, there's an immense amount of wildlife that red-tailed hawks, coyotes, rabbits. There was a pig one day that was loose. I think it was a 4-H student that lost her pig. But I'm just concerned about what Robin Hill is going to be. It didn't reflect on the site map that I looked at and how that's going to be maintained, and if there's going to be any sidewalk. There is a sidewalk, but it's on the other side of the fence on the common area to the development to the north. So that's my concern. I know Brett had some other concerns because he's down low in the valley and he has an empty lot that he would like to develop, but sewer is not available for him. Anyway, that's my concern. I don't know if you can answer those questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Mr. Mark Memelar?
Hi, my name is Mark Memelar. I have been a resident of Escondido since 1975, and actually in this area in North Escondido that we're talking about, so I'm very familiar with the development of this area, but I'm also, for the last 14 years, have been the executive director of Meadowbrook Village, which is the retirement community right across the street. And so it's in that capacity that I'm mainly here to speak. If you read the letters, the comments that were submitted, the large majority of them came from our residents. There's a lot of interest and concern from our residents, represented in person by a few people here, but represented in spirit by a lot of residents who are concerned. And if you read those comments, you saw themes in there. There's certainly concerns about the density that have been mentioned and the difference in density with the immediate surroundings. But I also listened to the last agenda item and the comments about the need for housing, and so I understand that, and we're not opposed to development in general. It was not too long ago that we were developed, so I get that. But in light of this development, the concerns are really two things, parking and traffic, which have been discussed to some extent. Looking at the development of that area and that road in particular over the years, as was mentioned earlier, it feels like it's an accidental thoroughfare. It didn't used to be that way. It was just a little narrow residential street. And with more developments to the north and the east, more and more people have found that as a shortcut, and they use it, and they don't obey the speed limit. And the volume is pretty intense, and the streets and the design of the street, the width of the street can't handle it. I'd love to see, and I'm not a traffic expert, but I'd love to see any way that the city can redirect or encourage traffic to go on streets that are designed for that, which would be Country Club and El Norte. Those are the other options for getting from the east to the west. So anything that could be done in that regard, rather than Iris, which just isn't set up for it. And then the parking issue is definitely a concern. The 102 units, they do have two-car garages, but how many people with two-car garages fit two cars in their two-car garage? These aren't parking spaces. These are garages, and if it's going to be used like I use mine, I only get one car in a three-car garage. So that's a concern as to where the rest of those cars are going to go. It was mentioned that they may go in public parking on Iris. I certainly would hope, at the very least, that it is preserved to be no parking on the east side, which is the Meadowbrook side of Iris. I think that would be a major safety concern for our residents getting out of the community there, trying to look both ways when cars are coming at greater than the speed limit and you have cars on your side blocking the sight lines, I think would absolutely be a disaster. Would prefer it not on the other side of the street as well, because it's just more traffic, more complication to trying to enter and exit on and off of Iris. But I don't know where else parking is going to go if you have 102 units and only a few surplus spots. So that's a question that I don't think has been really answered well from what I can see. I do appreciate what I've seen from just a design perspective. I was pleasantly surprised by the elevation views from Iris. It looks nice, it looks attractive. I appreciate the setbacks from the street there. So no objections to that. And again, not objections to development in general, but some really specific objections to traffic and parking that I hope you take a close look at, really for the safety of our residents in that whole community. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the last speaker, unless there are others, Joanne Rios?
Thank you for letting me speak. I've been in Escondido Hills at the top of that little bitty lane for 46 years, and I've raised 4 children there. And I know what all these people are opposing, and I'm with them all the way. In my opinion, it's a big fiasco. And if you really want my opinion, I would ask you to drive there and see it for yourself, because words can't describe how small it is. I'm not even talking traffic. They have a little bus that comes around every afternoon at 2:30, and I don't know how they would do it with, you say each person would have 2 cars. Men have trucks. Where are all these people going to go? I mean, you've got the bus people coming, you've got the water department. It is insane to think that we could have maybe 300 more cars on there from people coming home in the evening. I still don't understand this one part that he's describing here as exit only for North Iris Lane. Where would that be? Because when you come off of Iris Lane, I mean, yeah, you're coming into Center City, you got a light. Then the next light is Country Club. Now, are they going to have an entry or a one lane leaving on that little bitty path called, there's another Robin Hill Lane at the top, because it looks like there's only one way in and one way out. You got to see this to believe it. I just don't understand. And is it a low income? Are they mortgage owners? Are they renters? I have a lot of questions about it, and I suggest you folks take the time to really look at it, because all these people, they're not exaggerating when they say the traffic. People are coming home at 5, coming down Iris Lane, and other people are coming in, and it backs up all the way to that in retirement area. And it's all retirement people on the right. And they're the only ones that have a sidewalk. And they're absolutely right. There is absolutely no place to park, let alone men with trucks. I don't even know how it ever got started. I mean, I know there's a lot of work put into this, but I'm glad some people are here to see and tell what it's really going to be like if it happens. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. I believe, are there any other speakers from the public? You're welcome to come and speak, but you'll need to submit a slip afterwards if that's okay.
My name is Gabby Chavez Obergfeld, and I live on Cheyenne Lane. We moved and bought a house on that street a little over a year ago, and I have a 2-year-old son and a 4-year-old girl who will soon be going to the school North Broadway. So my question is, what will be done in terms of safety of the ability to use that street as a walkway to the school, possibly? When we first moved into this neighborhood, I was very excited. My husband and I have been renting for 10 years, and I know there's a lot of wordage about low-income housing. Hopefully there will be low-income housing included in this project. We are both working professionals and make pretty good money compared to the rest of the communities out there. We're both educated, and we were only able to afford our home recently. So, I think it's great to have housing. We just want to make sure that it's safe, and hopefully you guys can offer some low-income housing as well to other residents so they have an opportunity. And hopefully you guys are not considering low-income housing to be $700,000 That's not low-income housing. We could barely afford our home, and like I said, we're working professionals. We both have college degrees. So again, mainly just what's going to happen to that road? Are there going to be stop signs or any type of traffic control? Because that nobody abides by that 35 mile speed limit. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. All right, I believe that is the end of our public. I'd like to close the public hearing then at this time, and be given the hour. I was asked to, according to our bylaws, we cannot continue past 10 o'clock without a motion of the group to say let's finish this particular project. Or
I make the motion to continue with this project.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Chair Barbe,
Yes.
Commissioner Barber,
Yes.
Commissioner McCarroll,
Yes.
Vice Chair Paul,
Yes.
Commissioner Spear.
Yes.
The vote is 5-0. And if I could, who seconded the motion? I didn't. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll continue to complete this project review and carry on. Questions, comments for staff and for deliberation?
Yeah, Jake, could you, for the benefit of the audience, talk about the sidewalks for this project and on Robin Hill, and if there's any traffic mitigation? Thank you.
I'll tackle the sidewalks and overview, and then I'm going to hand it over to Owen to talk about traffic mitigation and what was looked at regarding the street on the traffic flow. Probably also including how they do traffic analysis when during COVID, and the assumptions that are made during that time. So let me go back to a picture here, and you can see in the right direction here. There is a gap along this project frontage for sidewalks. So this project will be completing that gap from the existing sidewalks, Cheyenne Lane on the south, to the existing sidewalks north of the project. There's a big gap right there. And the improvement to Robin Hill, there was a question also to Robin Hill Lane. Robin Hill Lane will be improved, I believe, 32 feet curb to curb within the applicant's right-of-way, or what they own in this area here. There's also another pathway through here, but it's gated. That is to the development to the north of this project. So they will be improving this project up to their property boundary here, and the HOA will maintain that portion of the project. With that, I'll hand it over to Owen to talk about maybe some of the traffic issues and how that was analyzed for the project. Their traffic engineer also is here to perhaps answer some of those questions.
Yeah, on the, just real quick Robin Hill Lane will remain private. So the portion they're going to widen and improve, that's going to remain private. And the HOA will maintain that portion. I think there was some concern about the rest of Robin Hill Lane up above, but that too is private, and this property I don't believe has any access rights that direction. So, they basically have no right to do work up in that area. As far as traffic, the traffic engineer, Mr. Rosas, is here, and maybe I'll just turn it over to him if you want to give an overview of how you took your counts and how you accommodated during COVID.
Absolutely. My name is Justin Rosas with LOS Engineering. I prepared both the VMT and the local mobility analysis. Specific to your question and the public's concern about counts during COVID, yes, we collected counts in 2020. COVID was in effect. We also had counts from 2018. So what you do is you start looking at the old counts, the new counts, and yes, the COVID counts are down. So you use the higher counts from 2018. In areas that you have no counts historically, but you only have a COVID, you look at areas where you have both old and new, and you get a factor, either reduction factor, which then you inverse and make it a growth factor, and you apply that to areas, and you bring up the date or the traffic up to what would be, let's say, pre-COVID, or in this case now would be better matching post-COVID. So that data, when we had from 2018, which was on North Iris, actually captures a lot of public concern about cut-through traffic. So it's already embedded in there. So, and should I touch on some of the public's concerns? So, there was a few people mentioned getting out or having delays coming down North Iris to get on the City Center Parkway. So the traffic analysis, which is not CEQA, this is a non-CEQA portion, we had traffic effects and what I would like to call a traffic concern, because the traffic effects have very clear criteria. If you exceed 2 seconds, you have to mitigate. Or improve. I'm sorry, mitigation is the old CEQA language. You have to actually improve the roadways. And we are doing that. We're widening North Iris along the project frontage, adding sidewalks. We are contributing to the portion of North Iris that is by City Center Parkway, because that's a narrow portion and eventually will get wide. We're contributing to that. That resolves the segment concern. The other element that would normally fall between the cracks, I'm going to call it a traffic concern. The city brought this up, that there are queues for people wanting to turn left coming down North Iris onto City Center Parkway. So after we looked at this and worked with the city staff and found that, hey, if we can rephase that signal and restripe it, it gives more time for the people coming down to turn left and get out and help reduce that queue. So it's an existing deficiency. We are contributing to that. So there's going to be a program that will help resolve that. Some of the other concerns, speeding in the area. I understand. I have kids. They've grown up. They're in college now. Hopefully they're not speeding. But this is a great opportunity for the public, I believe, to come and say, hey, we have these concerns. I'm sure there's city programs. There's ways that these things can be addressed for them, because we all worry about safety. We all have kids. Some other items from the CEQA, I don't know if for potential, in case a question comes up, yes, we had a VMT impact. And yes, we were able to mitigate it with the VMT bank. Lastly, there was concerns about circulation and the exit. The exit is only onto North Iris from the project. It's going to feed to North Iris. It's not going to go up Robin Hill. The entry and exit of the main project on Robin Hill is basically people are going to come down to Iris. And those intersections are at what we call acceptable levels of service. There is concern. I understand people's they have a different appreciation of delays in traffic and how much they can contend with it. But we have a standard. We work with the city. And if it's acceptable level of service, the city's criteria is you do not change anything. With that, I'll answer any other questions if they come up.
Are there other traffic-related or access questions? No. Other questions, comments?
I have a sidewalk clarification question. Okay. I know you talked about
Could you speak into the...
Oh, I'm sorry. North Iris, you talked about closing the gap with a sidewalk. I'm just trying to understand where that gap is. What is the extent of that sidewalk exactly?
Let me go back to the
Yeah,
photos here. So as you look at Iris Lane, there is sidewalk from, I believe, Village Road all the way down to this portion of the project where the street was built to collector road standards. And south for a portion along the Cheyenne Lane and that subdivision. However, there's a missing section here where the roadway widening, you've got that curve. The city doesn't have the right-of-way in that area. So there's a design or a development constriction right there. So that is a gap. But the traffic to get to this, or the pedestrian access to get to the schools would be going towards the north. So it's this gap in here that would be taken care of by the project.
From the proposed proposed development north will be continuous sidewalk to the schools, correct?
Up to Village Road here.
Okay.
I believe if you look at the pictures, there is sidewalk on the other side of the street also going up to that intersection. So this gap in here would be taken care of by the project.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Just one other thing I'd mention is that one of their VMT mitigation measures is to do crosswalk and pedestrian signal head improvements at Country Club and Broadway, which is heavily used by school traffic, and so there would be that improvement as well.
Could you repeat that again?
Yeah, one of their VMT mitigation measures is improvements to the intersection, both to crosswalks and to pedestrian heads, countdown heads, at the Country Club and Broadway intersection. And so that was geared, as a, kind of a high use area due to the school. And so that's another, kind of I heard talking about walking to the schools. That'll improve that.
Thank you for that clarification. Other questions, comments from the commissioners?
Commissioner Paul answered half the questions I had, and Owen provided answers to the other half without even being asked them.
Yeah, me too. Okay. Okay, Commissioner Spear.
Just a little more clarification on, in other words, several comments regarding parking. And we talked briefly already about parking, but we talked about parking on what would be, I guess, the west side of Iris as a potential, but not, we don't really know how that's going to shake out just yet, I think was where we left off on that.
Right.
If, I guess my question is, what if we don't get parking there or not much of it? Has there been any consideration for anything other than what's shown on the plan currently?
No, we don't count on-street parking as meeting the project requirement. You have to meet your requirement for projects, or you get like density bonus or other projects. You can get certain concessions or incentives to reduce parking. This is a market rate project. They are required to provide all the minimum required by the code. How the parking is calculated for multifamily, there's a percentage for 2-bedroom units. It goes up a bit for 3-bedroom, and for 4-bedroom even more. So they're meeting the minimum requirement and a few more on-site that they can provide. So you have to provide a certain amount of covered parking. They'll be providing actually 2 covered parking spaces in garage for each one, and I believe at least 27 open throughout the project. So if there's more on the street for overflow, that's available not to it's available to the public. So it's on a first come first served basis if it's available to the general public.
Right. Mr. Paul, I was going to ask you facetiously before, is this the only project that's ever come with that's not requesting a parking waiver? I mean, it's fully parked.
It's fully parked. I believe, actually, to answer that question, it's been more of the more dense infill along Center City Parkway or downtown. Those projects where trying to meet all the criteria is very difficult with the densities that are envisioned for those areas.
All right, any more questions, comments, concerns? Okay, is there a motion?
I'll move approval of Resolution 2022-14 approving the project.
I'll second that.
Okay, roll call.
Chair Barbe,
Approved.
Commissioner Barber,
Yes.
Commissioner Maccaro,
Approve.
Vice Chair Paul,
Yes, approve.
Commissioner Spear.
Approve.
The vote is 5-0 to approve.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Given the hour, I would like to propose that the remaining agenda items get continued to the next meeting, except for Adam, if you want to make a few comments about. I just want to say thank you very much to all of the public for coming and speaking to us. We really appreciate it. It's really important to get your input. Thank you, and have a great holiday season.
So I would just like to request if we can continue and state that we'll be continuing the items, particularly the public hearing item from the omnibus, to the January 10th Planning Commission meeting, January 10th, 2023. That way we can avoid having to republish public notice on it.
That would be fine. Do we need to?
Just need to state that in the record. So we will be continuing that item. It'll be heard on the 10th of January, 2023. Beyond that, I did want to just, well, I'll turn it back to you real quick for any oral communications, future agenda items, etc.
Okay. Yes. Any other oral communications? I don't believe so. Future agenda items, does anyone want to put one forward at this point? No. Okay, so back to you, Adam.
All right. So I just wanted to point out and bring to your attention that the staff report the agenda packet this month, for this meeting had that long-awaited list of upcoming development projects and other policy items that may be coming before you guys for discussion, consideration, etc. in the near future. No specific dates on any of them, but those are items that we've been working through and are getting closer to being ready to bring them forward. So beyond that, the only other thing I wanted to say is that our minutes clerk, Jessica Engel, is going to be leaving us. This will be her last meeting.
Sigh.
So I wanted to wish her good luck, congratulations, and really thank her for her work, not just with this group, but with everything that I lean on her for. So thank you, Jessica.
Really, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And good luck with your future endeavor. That's great. And I understand Annie might be helping us out in the future. Great. Well, thank you so much.
I guess I should have introduced Annie too as well. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay, so I believe that's it. I don't have any gavel to say adjourned. I don't know. Maybe the mayor took it. I'm just kidding.